Okay, Shabbat Shalom or Shavuot Tov, depending on where you are. We're going to begin this right now. So, welcome to the World Alliance of Qara'im weekly Torah study. This week we are doing Parashat Shoftim. Again, another very interesting or relevant parsha for Karaites, as we shall hopefully see if we get to it. And let me just share the screen correctly. Okay, so without any further ado, let's dig in. We are starting in Deuteronomy 16, 18. I'm going to bring it back just a little bit because we didn't get through the entire parsha last week, just to get some context here. So let's start in the beginning of Deuteronomy 16, and I'll try to keep my comments to an absolute minimum until at least we get to the beginning of this week's parsha. So this is the end of last week's parsha, and it says, Shamor et Hodesh Ha'aviv ועשית פסח ליהוה אלוהיך כי בחודש האביב הוציאך יהוה אלוהיך ממצרים לילה. I just have to say a couple of things on this verse, even though it's last week's part. First of all, Chodesh Aviv, anyone who follows along the Karaism knows how important this idea of Chodesh Aviv is. The Karaites, traditionally centuries ago, would look for what's called the Aviv barley. The Aviv barley is a certain stage in the ripeness of the barley. We will talk about that a bit more probably as the time for looking for the Aviv barley comes. But nobody really knows what it is. But according to a number of groups that go around and look for the Aviv barley, we believe that it is at a certain stage before the seed hardens inside the husk, the enclosure of the seed, and it's basically at a stage where it's kind of solid but not dry. That's the only way I can explain it. It's kind of a white cottony color. It's still wet, it's still moist, but it's not soft and squishy or anything like that. At any rate, so this is a big deal for the Karaites, this Chodesh HaAviv. But there's a lot to say about this, and nobody exactly knows how we determine Chodesh HaAviv. Okay, I have different ideas on it, but I'm not going to get into it now. I'll get to a different time. Okay. Another thing to say here is Ki b'chodesh Aviv hotziacha Yahweh Elohecha Mitzrayim Laila. So this could be interpreted as, because in the month of the Aviv, Yahweh your God took you out of Egypt at night. But I've also heard interpretations that this Laila, we've said many times that words can modify phrases that are disconnected from them in the Torah. We've seen this many, many, many times, and it causes a lot of confusion for English speakers. Let me get rid of this. So it could be that this Laila is Shmoret Chodesh Aviv V'asita Pesach liYahweh Elohecha, and do the Passover to your God Laila, at night. That's another possible interpretation, even though we're really supposed to do, it says we're supposed to bring the Passover offering Bena Arba'im, between the evenings, which means between sunset and total darkness. Laila technically is once the sun sets, but that's when Hakham Melech starts. So it could really be referring to keeping Hakham Melech once the sunset starts. I'm curious to see. Let's just see how Robert Alter, who I always go to. It's not that I think Robert Alter is the be-all and the end-all. Sometimes I disagree with him. It's just convenient. He's a good commentator. He has a very accessible translation and commentary on the Tanakh in English. And I like his stuff overall. It's kind of like the NIV. A lot of people criticize the NIV version. I mean, the way I got into the NIV version is that when I started using this website many years ago, Bible Hub, that was their default English translation. As you see over, it's the first one on the left. So I've heard a lot of criticism of the NIV translation, and yeah, there are some problems with it, and sometimes it integrates Christian philosophy, theology. But overall, I think the NIV translation is excellent. It agrees with the way I would translate the Torah many times. Okay, at any rate, so going back to Robert Alter, let's get an idea of what he has to say. So this is Deuteronomy 18. No, I just clicked on Leviticus 18. Oops. Oh, darn. Let's try this again. Deuteronomy 18. It is Deuteronomy 18. Wait, so what have I done wrong here? We're in Deuteronomy 16. Well, gag me with a spoon. Okay. 16. Okay, so he does interpret this as the Lord your God brought you out of Egypt in the night. I think it makes sense too, because it does speak about the Hatzot Halayla in the depths of the night, in the basically at midnight. God brought you out. So okay, I'm going to agree with this. I wonder if he mentions that though it's a bit ambiguous. It says something about the Aviv, as noted in the commentary on Exodus. Aviv, the month that corresponds to March, April, means new grain. In modern Hebrew, comes to mean spring. The rabbis took the name as a warrant for introducing leap months in order to keep the lunar calendar in phase with the solar calendar. Well, not just the rabbis. The rabbis did it with the calendar of Hillel II. We Karaites do it by observation, by searching for the Aviv barley. One can infer that some rudimentary mechanism of calendric correction was in place even in the early biblical period, or else the month of the new grain would have fallen sometimes in midwinter, sometimes in late summer, fall. Unlike other biblical texts on the festivals, the law here does not specify which day in Aviv marks the beginning of the festival, unless one interprets month as a new moon and a construction found among some ancient and modern commentators. Beginning of the festival. Well, I'm not sure why he's saying that. He's talking about Shmoret Chodesh Aviv. No, I think it's clearly speaking, keep that which you're meant to in the month of the Aviv by doing the Passover to Yahweh. We know when we're supposed to do that, which is on the 14th Bena on Ba'im, basically the end of basically as the 15th of the first month is coming in. Okay. Alrighty. Let's move on, or else I'm going to get bogged down. Zavachta, Pesach. Oh, shoot. Oh, sugar. That's not what I need to do. Let's try this again. No, let's try it again. There we go. Zavachta Pesach Yahweh Elohecha Son Bakar במקום אשר יבחר יהוה לשכן שמו שם. So this is just saying bring the Passover offering. We know when that's supposed to be done. לא תאכל עליו חמץ 7 ימים תאכל עליו מאסות לחם עוני כי בחיפזון יצאת מארץ מצרים למען תזכור את יום צאתך מארץ מצרים כל ימי חייך. So again, here's a classic construction which I've pointed out many, many, many times in the Torah, where you have a phrase that modifies another phrase separated by nits, leavened bread. 7 days to eat with it. Okay. So just speak. Okay, Allah means offering. Hakham last 7 days. First one, first 20 days per month. So the bread and flesh. At its okay, because when that remember from all of your life. So this phrase is interrupted by or actually here to here. This here. Okay, so let's read this again. All the classic instructions seen time and time I've mentioned probably by now, which intermediate phrase of the affliction. Okay, that's not too foreign for English speakers. You know, we could say eat matzah, comma, the bread of affliction, comma, in order that you shall remember, etc. Okay, but now we have another intermediate phrase, bread of affliction, key, because you hurriedly exited the land of Egypt. Okay? So this because this phrase here, ki b'chipazon yatzata me'eretz Mitzrayim, is me'eretz Mitzrayim, okay, is actually, well, it's referring to why, okay, tochal alav matzot, okay. So there are three phrases modifying this word matzot, okay. Matzot is called, or this phrase, I should say, okay. Well, actually, lechem oni is modifying just the word matzot. Matzot is lechem oni. Matzot is the bread of affliction. This next phrase, ki b'chipazon yatzata me'eretz Mitzrayim, is modifying the phrase, really this entire phrase, but we'll start it from here, okay, is modifying shivat yamim tochal alav matzot. You shall eat with it matzot. And why? Because you hurriedly left Egypt, okay? And then this phrase here is also modifying whoops, where is it? Tochal alav matzot. Okay, eat upon it matzot. So we have three phrases, right? And that's a little bit cumbersome for English speakers. It would be something like saying, oh, I'm looking at pumpkins I picked from the backyard right now. So eat pumpkins, which are orange, that were grown in the backyard because it is much better than buying them, or because they are orange and because they are delicious and better than being bought in the store, right? So we have three phrases, and it might sound like this. The third phrase is modifying the second phrase. Well, that wasn't a good example. I always say when I give examples, that wasn't a good example, but that was. Let me give another one. Eat pumpkins, which are orange, because they grew in the garden, which are very healthy for the body. Okay, so you might think which are very healthy for the body is modifying the phrase because they grew in the garden, but really what I intend to say is that modifies the original phrase eat pumpkins or pumpkins. Okay, so it gets a bit confusing because grammar doesn't work in the same linear way with the Torah. Oh, there's my friend Bruce. Hi, Bruce, you're in.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Good.
Good. Okay, so we are in. I took it back a little bit to the end of last week's parsha. So I was just discussing Deuteronomy 16:3, and now we're up to 4. Okay, If you want to read, just let me know. Would you like to read a verse or two?
I'm listening.
Okay. Were you able to hear it, or just now when I added you?
At first, I couldn't hear anything. It was all peculiar, but now it sounds fine.
Okie dokie. All right. So we are in verse 4. Okay. V'lo yira'eh lecha sa'or. Highlighted in. V'lo yira'eh lecha sa'or b'chol gvulcha shi'at yamim v'lo yalin min habasar asher tizbach ba'erev b'yom ha'rishon laboker. Okay. So these are just basically what we're seeing here is a replay, and we had a bit more time, and this is not actually our parsha. This is just to get the context for our parsha this week. This is the end of last week's parsha. This is basically a replay of the laws that we have in Exodus in Exodus 12, right? So lo yira'eh lecha sa'or b'chol gvulecha. So you should not see sa'or. Sa'or we know is leavening agent. The way that the Israelites made bread in ancient times was the only way that people basically made bread in ancient times, which is what we would call sourdough bread today. They had sourdough starter. In fact, the word sa'or, in my strong opinion, is related to the word sour. That might even be attested to in the standard etymologies, although they usually kind of get back to Latin or maybe Greek. And then they usually Latin, and then they start talking about something called Proto-Indo-European and go right off the derech and never like to relate modern English words back to Semitic origins. I think because of anti-Semitism and anti-Bible and anti-God sentiments. At any rate, the word "or" I believe is related to the English word "sour," and I remember tracing it back to the Latin. I'm not going to do it now, but it seemed to check out. Okay, so you're not supposed to see this leavening agent anywhere within your borders. Basically, that's just another way of saying no hametz. Although, if you want to take it more literally, where it means the leavening agent, okay, so the leavening agent will be put away because the sourdough starter is usually saved to be used in making bread. Okay, so you put it away somewhere where it can't be seen. Okay, until after Passover is over, and then you can take that sourdough starter and make bread from it again. At any rate, we spoke about this a lot when we were studying Exodus, so I don't want to get bogged down in it since it's not even this week's parsha. Okay, so anything that's left over from the Passover offering, you should not leave until the morning. Okay, but if I were to take a very quick detour, it's interesting. We go to Exodus. It's going to be in Exodus 12. Because this teaches us something very, 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 very important about the way that the Torah works. Okay, so let me just find it here. Actually, I can find it here. Bruce, I'm gonna mute you because there's a lot of background noise. If you want to say something, just unmute your own mic. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So if we go back to Exodus, actually, let me find the exact verse here. This out of the way, and we are oh no, I keep on forgetting I have it in a different spreadsheet. So let me just find it here. 1 second. 1 second here. I'm just finding one particular verse. Here it is. Okay, so let's compare this. Okay, 1 second. Okay. So this is Exodus 12, 10. Okay. This is speaking about the Passover offering. Do not lototiru mimenu ad boker wa hanutar mimenu ad boker ba'esh tisrefu. Okay. So don't let it remain until the morning, and that which remains into the morning should be burnt in fire. Okay. So there's two things to point out here. Okay. So here, if we compare it to Deuteronomy 16, okay. So first of all, it says, "V'lo yalin min habasar asher tizbach ba'erev bayom harishon laboker." Okay, so it just says you should not allow this meat, and it's speaking clearly about the Passover offering, to remain until the morning. It doesn't say anything about burning it in the fire. It's not allowed to remain until the morning. Okay, here it says, don't let it remain into the morning, but that which remains, burn in the fire. So there are two questions. First of all, why doesn't Deuteronomy mention anything about burning that which is left over in the fire? And second of all, why does Exodus, if I were to take, let's say, a modern kind of Western view on it, or even a rabbinical view on it, the Torah seems to contradict itself. Here in Exodus 10, first it says, do not allow it to remain until the morning. And then it says that which remains, burn in the fire. But it just said before, don't allow it to remain in the morning. Okay? Bruce, anything you want to say about that?
No, I never thought about it.
Okay.
Continue. Good.
All right. So the point is, if we were rabbis, we would start picking this apart and saying, oh, this means that, who knows, this is a secret, message that is saying, because don't leave it into the morning, but you left it into the morning, and it speaks about, I don't know, in Isaiah, whatever, cows leaping over the hills in the morning, that it means that you can also make the Passover sacrifice out of cows. I'm just making it all up, right? But that would kind of be a rabbinical kind of take on this thing. They would say, "Oh, this is a contradiction. It doesn't make any sense. There must be a secret learning here. There must be a deeper learning in here that we have to extract." Okay, and if I were a secular biblical scholar, quote unquote, actually secular biblical scholars, I've learned tons from them. I try not to throw out the baby with the bathwater. But they would say something like, "Oh, this is proof that there are two different versions of the Torah. This first part here, Lo tutiru mimeno ad boker, was written by the E source, and because it's very strict. And then the J source, which is a little bit less legalistic and less strict, says that which you can leave until the morning, but then you have to burn it by fire. So this is a unique example, or a very rare example, where we have two different sources, the E and the J source, in one sentence. Okay, so that's how we have different, my simplified examples of different approaches that people take when they find shaim, when they find things that seem a little bit questionable in the Torah. But that's not what's really going on at all. So we raised two issues. Okay, let's talk about the first one first. So first of all, in Deuteronomy 16. Okay, it doesn't say anything about that which is left over in the fire shall be burnt in the next morning. Okay, but in Exodus it does. Okay, how do you account for that contradiction? And the answer is it's really not a contradiction at all. The Torah is not meant to be, shall we say, a C++ program. Okay, my background is computer programming and computer science, so maybe that's an analogy I feel comfortable using. Right? It doesn't have to be X equals Y exactly. The Torah is not meant to be understood or read or learned that way. Okay, it mentions things. Sometimes it mentions them in greater detail. Sometimes it mentions them in lesser detail. Sometimes it'll take a law, revisit it, and add new things to that law, or not add new things to that law. Let's put it this way: give new facets to that law that maybe were not covered in another explanation of the law. Shabbat is a classic example. In one place it says keep the Shabbat because God rested on the seventh day, and another place it says keep the Shabbat because you must rest in order that your son, daughter, slaves, animals, etc. May rest. Okay, so it's not that the two are contradictions. It's that it's giving a different facet. Okay, it's kind of like if you watch a movie and then a remake of a movie, right? Each take on it may give different facets. Maybe that's another bad example because that's two different productions. If you watch a movie and then you watch the director's cut of the movie with extra scenes added in and explanations, then maybe you're going to get a slightly different perspective. And that's all that's happening here. So that we see that many times in the Torah. In fact, the rule, it's the rule rather than the exception, that when we see a repeat, and sometimes laws in the Torah are repeated 3, 4, 5, I don't know what the maximum is. Shabbat is repeated probably around 5 or 6 times. I'd have to go back and count it, right? And each time we get a slightly different facet of the Shabbat. Okay, what we're supposed to do, why we're supposed to do it. Okay, so when laws are repeated, they don't contradict each other; they illuminate each other. That's the proper integrated, holistic. Oh, I hate that word, holistic. We'll use integrated Torah way to say that it's a contradiction written by two different sources, and it's that the Torah is, you have to kind of look at it as approaching the same subject many times, each time from a slightly different angle. So that way, when you approach a subject from multiple angles, you really, really understand what it's all about. That is the true way to look at these contradictions in the Torah. Okay, so now the other thing, which is in Exodus 12, it says, "Lo totiru mimenu ad haboker," do not allow it to remain, okay, let nothing remain of it until the morning. And then it says, "Hanutar mimenu ad haboker ba'esh tisrafu," okay, that which remains in the morning shall be burnt with fire. Is this a contradiction? No, not at all. We see this many times, that the Torah says don't do something or do something, and then it says, well, usually it's don't do something, but if you do, then this is the way you do it, right? So this would be, I hate to use the phrases that the rabbis use because it somehow seems that I'm taking a rabbinical point of view, or that I'm supporting the rabbis in their approach towards it. But it's what you would call, what the rabbis would call lechatchila and b'diavad, right? So yes, you shouldn't let it remain into the morning. That's the best thing to do. But if it happens to remain into the morning, right? Can't always prevent that from happening. When, if you've eaten enough and you can't shove another piece of Passover offering down your throat, then some might just be left over. So if b'diavad it does remain into the morning, then you burn it with fire. Okay, so there's no contradiction here. There's no secret knowledge to be extracted. This is a common way that the Torah interacts. And we've come across many examples, which escape me at the moment. If I can think of one, I will certainly mention it. But that, again, is the correct integrated Torah way to look at things. Okay? Okay, so that's that. Let's go on. Bruce, any comments?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you loud and clear.
Okay, I was just going to say, I don't think it's a contradiction, because you don't leave it till the morning in order to eat it the next morning. I think that's understood, that you don't leave it and in order to consume it the following morning. So therefore you burn it. So I agree with you. I don't see any contradiction.
Right, for sure. Okay, all right, so let's go on. So we are in Deuteronomy. Okay, so we're in Deuteronomy 18. I'm just gonna mute you again, Bruce. I think you can unmute yourself. If not, just if you're having problems, if you want to say something and you can't unmute yourself, just let me know and I'll unmute you. Okay, so verse 5. Okay, lo tuchal lizboh et hapasach ba ehad sha'arech. I'm sorry, sha'arecha asher Yahweh Elohecha noten lach. Okay, so you're not supposed to, you can't bring the Passover offering. When it says behad sha'arech is always referring to, it means in your cities. Okay, we see this phrase many times. Okay, so you have the sha'arech is basically a there's a technical word for it, but I can't remember. It's where one part represents the whole. The example they always give is, Washington says that, that they will buy no more gas from Russia or something like that. They don't mean Washington is not going to buy gas. It means the United States, right? So sha'arecha is whatever that the technical term for that linguistic phenomenon is. Then this is what it means. It's really speaking about your cities. And why does it use the word sha'arecha? Well, it uses sha'arecha because any city of any significance in ancient times had a wall around it. Okay, and walls had gates, sha'arecha, and within those gates, that's where all the activity took place. So basically, you usually had one main gate or maybe multiple main gates to a city. In, for instance, the book of Nehemiah, we actually have a list of the various gates of Jerusalem as they are being rebuilt. Okay, and the gates of the city is where all the activity took place. Okay, that's where the marketplace was. That's where the judges sat. That's where the elders sat. That's where the news was exchanged. That's where the activity was. I mean, if you picture it now, even for those of you who have been to the old city of Jerusalem, which still has city walls, right? Not made in the time of the Israelites, but actually made by the Ottoman Turks in the 1500s. That's our current wall around Jerusalem. But if you walk, let's say, through Jaffa Gate, you'll see there's activity right there. There's a big hub of activity right when you walk through the gate, because that's where people are coming in and out, right? It's kind of a bottleneck that forces people to go through the gates to get in and out of the city, right? So that naturally that's where activity is gonna be built up. If you look at, let's say, Shara Ashpa, the dung gate, right? There's tons of activity there. There's a bus stop there, and all the people going to the kotel are coming in and out of that gate, right? So right inside the gate, right outside the gate, there's a lot of activity. So the activity in a walled city takes place near the gates. Okay, we have, of course, the famous phrase in the end of one second, in the end of Proverbs. Sorry, one second. Let me just close an app here because I'm getting notifications that I don't want to bother me right now. Oops, let's try it again. So yeah, so we have in Proverbs, the very end of Proverbs. In fact, let's find it. It is the last line in Proverbs, right? If anyone asks you what is the last line in Proverbs, you can say Tnula mipri yadeha uyahaluha bisha'arim ma'aseha, right? We all know this from Eshet Chayil, right? This is Eshet Chayil. Eshet Chayil miyimsa verachot nifni michra. I wish our mutual friend Olivia were here to sing it. Even though I have a decent voice, I do not have a angelic voice as Olivia does. At any rate, so the very last word in the book of Proverbs, or the very last sentence in the book of Proverbs, is the last sentence in Eshet Chayil, which is Tnula. Wait, how'd it go? Sheker achen heaven ayofi shayirat Adonai titalal tnula mipri yadeha v'yahaleluha b'sha'ari maseha. So what does this mean? Proverbs 31:31, right? The last line in the entire book of Proverbs. Okay, give unto her the fruits of her labor, of her hands. Okay, in other words, give her credit for what she does. We halaluha, and they shall praise her. Bishari ma'aseha. I'm sorry, they shall praise ma'aseha, her actions, ba'sharim, in the gates. Well, what does that mean? It means that in this hub of activity inside the cities, inside the walled cities, and again, any city of significance in ancient times was a walled city. A lot of times, the punishment for Jerusalem was when it was conquered was that its walls were stripped down. Right? It's like stripping a human being naked. Right? If you strip a city of its walls, you're basically stripping of all of its glory, of all of its power, of all of its influence. It's basically like stripping someone naked. Right? So these walled cities. So here we go. Right? So we halaluha bishari maseha. So her praises, they shall praise her deeds in the gates. Okay, in the gates, in the hub of activity, everyone there is going to be talking about this wonderful woman, this woman of valor. Wow, look at this this wonderful woman, all of the stuff she does, and this is all going to take place in the gates. The gates is where all the activity was. When Boaz purchased the inheritance of Elimelech, when Boaz purchased the inheritance of Elimelech, that was also done in the gates, right? It was done in the gates of the city, so explicitly, okay? So that gives us insight into Shabbat Shalom, Itan Avior, Shavuot Tov. So that gives us insight into this here, okay? But so whenever it says B'had Sha'arecha, and this phrase appears a bunch of times in a bunch of different contexts, it always means in your cities. And it's always, as actually Robert Alter, I think in last week's parsha we read it, points out that this is always in contrast to Jerusalem, to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, what later would become the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. But before it was to the place where the tabernacle is, or the tabernacle was at any given time. Okay, so lo tuchal lizbach et hapasach b'echad sharecha, meaning you can't do it in your cities. Okay, asher Yahweh Elohecha noten lach, which Yahweh your God gives to you. In other words, He's going to give you these cities. He's going to allow you to conquer these cities, right? Ki'im, and ki'im is a phrase of contrast. Ki'im means but rather, right? Ki'im, literally, well, ki is kind of a hard word to translate, but we'll translate the whole phrase as but rather, okay? El hamakom asher yivhar El hamakom asher yivhar Yahweh Elohecha lishachen shemo sham tizbach et hapasach tizbach et hapasach. Let's stop there, okay? So you have to take it to the place which Yahweh your God shall choose to make His name dwell there. What is that place? We saw last week. We studied these verses very specifically. This is the very end of the second book of Samuel. I'll just bring up very briefly. And we have in 2 Samuel 24, I'm not going to read through the whole thing now. We actually read through it last week, okay? That David wants to take a census of his men. He's punished. He has one of three choices, right? And then he says the famous phrase, "Let us fall into the hands of God, because His mercy is great." Okay, and so then there's a plague that's brought against Israel. Okay, and that plague is going to extend to Jerusalem. Okay, and then God. And here's the verse. Okay, on that day, I'll just read this one verse. Okay, and on that day, God went to David and said to him, "Go up and build an altar to Yahweh on the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite." Okay, so David goes up. Okay, he wants to build an altar, as he's told by the prophet God, on the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite. Okay, Araunah the Jebusite wants to give him the land for free. David insists, just as Abraham insists to Ephron the Hittite, that he buy the Marat Machpelah, the cave in the field of Machpelah. Okay, that David insists that he pays Araunah for his threshing floor. He pays Araunah for the threshing floor, and there it says in verse 25, David built an altar to Yahweh there and sacrificed burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. Then the Lord answered his prayer in behalf of the land, and the plague on Israel was stopped. Okay, so this was in Jerusalem. Okay, because the whole context here was that that the plague was going to overrun Jerusalem. Let me just find that for 1 second. Stress. When David said the United States have sinned, blah blah blah. Here. Okay. One second. Maybe it doesn't say explicitly Jerusalem, but the understanding is, and I can't remember where, I'll have to check exactly, that this was Jerusalem, and this is this altar that David built is going to be the future site of the temple. Okay, so this is the place. When we go back to Deuteronomy here, and it says, to the place which Yahweh your God shall choose to place His name there. This is speaking about what is later revealed, okay, at the end of the second book of Samuel. This is speaking about specifically Jerusalem. Okay, even though the tabernacle was in other places before the temple was built in Jerusalem, that is not the place. Okay, God eventually says He's going to reveal the place that His name is going to dwell, and that place is the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Before that, the altar wandered around, right? The tabernacle wandered around from place to place. It was in Shiloh, most famously, but it wandered, right? And so the place was not yet revealed until the end of the second book of Samuel, and that place was finally revealed. Once that place is revealed, then that's the only place you're allowed to bring sacrifices. Okay, so that's what it's referring to. Okay. But Erev Kivo Shemesh. Okay, so let's go back to here. Okay, כי אם המקום אשר יבחר יהוה אלוהיך לשכן שמו שם, תזבח את הפסח בערב, כבוא השמש, מועד צאתך ממצרים. Okay, when the sun sets, כבוא השמש always means at sunset. The way the Tanakh speaks about sunrise and sunset is sunrise is often referred to as Kitseta Shemesh, okay, or Tseta Shemesh when the sun goes out, and the sunset is referred to Kibo Hashemesh or Bo Hashemesh when the sun comes in. The sun goes out and the sun comes in. Okay, so this also illuminates what we know from Exodus. It's going to be back in Exodus 12, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, or thereabouts. I'm pretty sure it's in Exodus 12, where it says Bena Arba'im. At any rate, where it says to bring the Passover offering, Bena Arba'im, between the evenings, right? This is illuminating that, right? It doesn't say here to bring it Bena Arba'im. It says Kivo Shemesh, when the sun sets. Well, Bena Arba'im, what does that mean? Okay, what is Arba'im? Okay, Arba'im means the 2 evenings. It's literally what it means, Erev and Arba'im, okay? So Arba'im is the plural of evening, okay? So it's between the evenings, okay? Or as I have a friend who translates it as between the sunsets, but what it really means is what we would call in English dusk, okay? Dusk means very specifically, okay, it's the time between when the sun sets and the time that the sky reaches total darkness. Okay, so let's look at this word dusk for a second. Ooh, what does dusk mean? Okay, the darker part of twilight, especially at night. I want the technical. So dusk is the time just before night when the daylight is almost gone, but when it's not completely dark. Okay. So it's after the daylight has gone. Well, maybe it's not technically dusk then because the daylight is almost gone. So maybe it means closer to night. But between the evenings is what, okay, we're going to use the word dusk. Okay. It's basically dusk. It means once the sun sets, okay, that's the end of what we call yom, of day. That's the beginning of erev. Okay, erev comes from the underlying Hebrew root arav, which means mix. Okay, like le'arbev in modern Hebrew means to mix, right? To mix together. So erev is the mix. It's the mix between day and night. So yom is day, Laila is night, and the time between day and night is the erev, is the mix. It's the mix between day and night. Okay, so erev. Or Bena Arba'im, as it's referred to sometimes, between the mixes, or from the beginning of the mix to the end of the mix. The beginning of the mix starts as soon as the sun dips below the horizon. The second you can no longer see the disk of the sun on the horizon, that's the beginning of the evening. And the end of the evening is when the sky reaches maximum darkness for that night, right? It's not going to be the same darkness every night. It depends if it's a full moon, if it's a new moon, if it's a quarter moon. It depends on the cloud cover. It depends on all kinds of things. But basically it means when the sun no longer has influence directly, because the light from the moon reflects off the light from the moon is light reflected from the sun, right? That we see. So when the sun no longer has direct influence on the sky, that is the end of the evenings. That's the beginning of night. Okay. So basically, it's saying the same thing here. Okay. So when it says, okay. So first of all, it doesn't say Bena Arba'im. It says Tizbach de Pesach ba'erev. Okay. And now we have a definition. What is erev? Kivo hashemesh. Okay. When the sun sets, that's when the evening starts. And we didn't know it before. Now we know it. Okay. That once the sun sets on the 14th of the first month, the 14th of the month of the Aviv, okay, what the rabbis might call Nisan, then that is when we bring the Passover offering. Okay, Moed Sitcha Mitzrayim, and this is the time, meaning the specific time, the appointed time. Sometimes it's translated as the time of your going out from Egypt. When did we go out from Egypt? We went out from Egypt in midnight of the 15th, right? So the sun sets. Okay, that's when we have the evening. Okay, that's when the next day starts. really, or maybe we could say that it doesn't start until the end of the evening. It's not really 100% clear, but let's say that we have the evening, which is kind of a mix between the 14th and the 15th. When it's completely night, that's when the new day starts. That's now the 15th. So this is now basically the time of our going out of Egypt, because when we went out of Egypt at midnight, that's when the mashchit, that's when the destroying angel went around and passed over the houses of the Israelites and struck the houses of the, killed the firstborn in the houses of the Egyptians. That happened in the 15th at midnight. Okay? All right. Any questions, any comments? Bruce, anything you want to say?
It's good. Good teaching.
Okay.
I'm enjoying it.
Cool. Cool. Yeah, time in the Torah is a very, very, it's just completely fascinating because it's very different from the way we understand it in this day and age. So, so for instance, there was the Israelites. They divided the night into three sections, into three equal sections called the Mishmerot. So there's Mishmeret Alayla. There's Mishmeret. I think it's called. I have to remember now. Maybe Mishmeret Tichonit or Mishmeret Shnia. I can't remember. And then Mishmeret Boker. Right. So let's say you have the night. Right. Let's take an idealized version of the night. Let's say the sun sets at 6 o'clock p.m. Okay, and let's say the sun rises. No, let's say the sun sets at 5 o'clock p.m. and let's say it rises at 7 o'clock a.m. Okay, we'll just take an idealized version. And let's say that it's evening from 5 to 6 p.m. and then let's say it's or dusk from 5 to 6 p.m. and then let's say it's dawn from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. Okay, so 5 the sun sets, 6 evening ends and night begins, 6 p.m., 6 a.m. Night ends and dawn begins, and then 7 a.m. the sun rises, let's say, okay? That means the night is going from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. That's 12 hours, okay? Those 12 hours were divided into 3 mishmarot, into 3 guards, okay? The night guard, the middle guard, and then the morning guard. So if you take those 12 hours, 12 divided by 3 is 4. Each one would be 4 hours long, okay? So the Mishmeret Alayla would be from 6 o'clock to 10 o'clock. The Mishmeret Shnia or the Mishmeret Tichonit, I can't remember exactly what it's called, it's escaping me right now, would be from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. And then the Mishmeret Boker, the morning watch, would be from 2 a.m. until 6 a.m. And then you would have Alot Shachar, then you would have the lifting up of the darkness or the dawn, and then that would last. The Alot Shachar, the lifting up of the darkness, or what we would call the dawn, would last until the sun came out. In our idealized version here, 7 o'clock a.m. And then you'd have Yom, and then Yom continues until, again in our idealized version, until 5 o'clock p.m. The sun sets, Bo Hashemesh, sun comes in, okay, at 5 p.m. until 6 p.m. Then we have Erev or Ben Arba'im. We have the mix between night and day, and then at 6 p.m. The sky reaches its maximum darkness, and then we have Laila. And then again, the 3 mishmarot of the Laila, right? And then we have Chatzot Laila, Chatzot, okay? That is exactly, again, in our idealized version, that would be halfway through the night. So that would be what we would call 12 midnight, okay? In fact, it would always, well, when it's daylight savings time, it would be, but it would be 12 midnight. So that's the way that the day and the night were understood and set up by the Israelites. Okay, let's go on. So, ובשעת ובחרת במקום אשר יבחר יהוה אלוהיך בו, ופנית בבוקר והלכת לאוהליך. So, this is speaking about the Passover sacrifice again, right? So you eat it in the place that God has chosen, okay? And then in the morning you go back to your tents. The olecha usually means to your houses, to your dwelling places. But in this case, I don't think it's speaking about that. I think what it's speaking about. Remember that well, I don't know. I'd have to think about it a bit more. But it's really la'olecha means back to your dwelling places. So everyone back to the city. But it wouldn't make sense to me because in the morning to go back to your dwelling places, this is now the first day of Chag HaMatzot. Chag HaMatzot is one of the Moadim. Malechet Avodah is prohibited. Doing work is prohibited on that day. So traveling back to your place of dwelling, especially if it's far away, it wouldn't make sense that you do it on the morning of the 15th. Second of all, we know that that Passover, that Chag HaMatzot is one of the 3 pilgrimage holidays in which you're supposed to be in Jerusalem, ostensibly maybe for the entire 7 days. Okay, it's not clear. Certainly for Sukkot, you're supposed to be for the entire 7 days in Jerusalem, living in your Sukkot. Okay, so maybe when it says here, go back to your tents, it means your tents that are camped at this point around Jerusalem. It doesn't say Sukkot because it's not the festival of tabernacles. We don't have to build tabernacles for Passover, so people would bring tents and they would camp in tents wherever they happen to be, around Jerusalem and around the hills of Jerusalem. And after bringing the Passover sacrifice, they would go back. They would in the morning they would go back to their tents, or it could mean going back to your houses, wherever you live. If you lived in, I don't know, Shomron or something like that, but it just doesn't make sense to me. Okay. Any rate, Sheshit Yamim Tochal Matzot Ubiyom Shvi'i Atzeret Yahweh Elohecha Lo Ta'aseh Milacha. Okay. So for 6 days you shall eat matzot. Oh, that's weird. It says in Exodus 12, it says for 7, or in Exodus 13 actually, it says for 7 days you shall eat matzot. Here it says for 6 days you shall eat matzot. Oh my God, it's a contradiction. Here we go again, right? This either proves that there's secret hidden knowledge going on here, or that the Torah is just a fake document that was established, culled together from various different sources much later on, and that's why it's full of contradictions. Okay, but it's not full of contradictions because again, what is it saying here? Okay. First of all, the 7th day is mentioned here. Okay? So for 6 days, you shall eat matzot. And on the 7th day is an atzeret. How can we translate it? They usually translate it as a sacred assembly or something like that. Okay? So on the 7th day is a sacred assembly to Yahweh, your God. Do not do any work. Okay, so the way the Torah works is that this is not a contradiction at all. We already know from Exodus 13 that we're not supposed to eat matzot for 7 days, right? So what it's really saying here is for 6 days, all you do is refrain from matzot. But on the 7th day, in addition to that, you also have an atzeret, and you're supposed to refrain from doing milacha. Okay, it's not implying that you're not supposed to eat matzot on 7 days. It's implying on the 7th day. It's just saying that the 7th day is different from the other 6 in the sense that in addition to not eating matzot, or in addition to eating matzot or refraining from leavened bread, you also have an atzeret and you have to refrain from milacha. Okay, so again, that's the holistic. No, we're not using that word. The integrated way to look at the Torah. Okay, let's move on. Now we get to the Chag Shavuot, and again, we're not even up to this week's parsha yet. This is just by way of background, but of course, I couldn't help myself, and I had to say a whole bunch of things about it. Okay, so now we are in Deuteronomy 16:9. So Shiv'a Shavuot tispar lach me hachel hermesh b'kama hachel lispor Shiv'a Shavuot. Okay, so this is speaking about when you start counting Shavuot. The 7 weeks, right? We count 7 weeks, and then on the following day is Chag Shavuot. It seems pretty clear from Leviticus 23, and I've gone through this many times before, that we count the weeks based on the Shabbat. We count 7 Shabbats. It doesn't really make sense to say that the word Shabbat, where it says you count Sheva Shabbatot. It doesn't make sense to say that means 7 Tuesdays or 7 Wednesdays, as the rabbis would say. But we do have one problem, which both the rabbis and the Karaites really have a problem with, and that is that it does not tell us explicitly when to start counting these 7 weeks. So the rabbis say that, so it says, all it says is that you count them mimacharat to Shabbat, from the day following the Shabbat. The rabbis interpret the word Shabbat to mean the first day of Chag HaMatzot, because on that day is when you're supposed to lashbit. You're supposed to take away all leavened bread from your house, which in the Torah uses the word lashbit, which is related to the word Shabbat. And so they say that the first day, the 15th day of the first month, is the Shabbat, and so the next day, the second day of Chag HaMatzot, which would be the 16th of what they would call Nisan, is when you start counting the 7 weeks, right? You bring the Omer offering, and then you start counting the 7 weeks. Okay, so that's nice. They really have to rely on their oral law to justify that completely, because the word Shabbat, it's very questionable whether it could refer to that first day of Chag HaMatzot. The Karaites, on the other hand, say that that when it says the word Shabbat in Leviticus 23, and let's bring up Leviticus 23 for a second, just so we can see it. All right. So festival weeks. So here, from the day after the Shabbat, the day you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, count off 7 weeks. Okay. So the Karaites have another problem, and that is that it says we Karaites generally interpret the day after the Shabbat to mean what we would call a Sunday, right? That you start counting. You start counting 7 Shabbats, okay, and or let's put it this way: you start counting. You bring the Omer offering on a Sunday, and then you count 7 Shabbats, okay. So the Sunday that you bring the Omer offering, that's day 1. The following Shabbat would be day 7, and then you count off a total of 7 Shabbats, and then the day after that, which would be 7 Sundays after you brought the Omer offering, or 50 days later, that is going to be Chag HaShavuot. The only problem is, if we do count starting on a Sunday and then counting off Shabbats, it doesn't tell us which Shabbat or which Sunday we bring it on. When it says the day after the Shabbat, it doesn't tell us which Shabbat that's referring to. So the Karaites have generally understood it to mean, because it seems to be related to Chag HaMatzot, right? That it means the Shabbat that occurs within the 7 days of Chag HaMatzot. Since Chag HaMatzot lasts for exactly 7 days, there will be exactly 1 Shabbat within Chag HaMatzot. It can be anywhere from the 15th to the 21st. Okay, depending on when Chag HaMatzot what days of the week Chag HaMatzot falls out that year. So I have to get a cup of water. So just excuse me. Talking too much and drinking too little. Bruce, anything you want to say or add in the meantime while I go grab a glass of water for a second?
No, I've been basically listening.
What's that?
I'm basically listening and listening and learning for a change instead of spouting.
Okay. All right. Cool. Okay, so we Karaites have a problem, the Torah doesn't tell us which Shabbat. When it says the day after the Shabbat in Leviticus 23, we don't know which Shabbat it's referring to. Okay, that's a problem. So we've always generally assumed it's the Shabbat that occurs within the 7 days of Passover, since there'll only be 1. But here we have another possibility. It says me'echel chermesh bakama. Okay, once the chermesh is the sickle, okay, or the crescent, literally, okay, but it means the sickle in this case. Bakama is usually translated as a standing grain, right? So we know that wheat, barley, well, those would be the 2 main ones: wheat, barley, and other related grains like oats, spelt rye. When they become dry, they stand up. And that's called the standing grain, ama. Okay, so me'echel chermesh bakama, it means when you start harvesting the in this case it would really be referring to the barley, because that's the crop that would be the grain crop that reaches ripeness earliest, right? So, but it's when you start harvesting the grains, okay, the beginning of the grain harvest. Okay, well, what's the beginning of the grain harvest? It doesn't necessarily have to be that Shabbat that falls within Passover. So I knew somebody who used to say you check with the farmers in Israel and you see when are they starting to harvest the barley, and that's when you declare that that's the beginning of the barley harvest. Okay, you find that the next Shabbat after that. You can't find the previous one because they hadn't started yet, so you didn't know they had started. And that would be the Shabbat, the day after which you bring the Omer offering, and then you start counting the 50 days. And that makes perfect sense, right? Because in order to bring the Omer offering is you have to take an Omer with a sheaf, basically a bundle of barley, and you have to elevate it or wave it, or nobody knows exactly sure. It's just Nufat Omer, so it's either sometimes they'll call it the wave offering, the wave sheaf offering. Sometimes they'll call it the elevation offering, right? So either lift it up, or the Kohen either lifts it up or waves it back and forth, or whatever the case may be. That has to be done with the barley that's been harvested, because it's a first fruits offering. Okay, so this first fruits offering has to take place after the beginning of the barley harvest, right? So okay, then the traditional Karaites might come back and say, well, when we looked for the Aviv, we know that 2 weeks later after finding the Aviv, we found the Aviv. Then the month started. And then the following month is the Chodesh Aviv, and then already the barley is going to be ripe by that time. But that's problematic. And now Bruce, this kind of gets us into discussions regarding our biblical calendar society, right? So here's an issue I'm going to raise to you. Okay, let's take an extreme case. Okay, let's say that we observe the new moon on, let's say March 1st. I'm using idealized situation. We observe the new moon on March 1st, or we go looking for Aviv barley on February 28th, and we don't find any Aviv barley. Okay, now the new moon comes on March 1st, and we do not declare that the Chodesh Aviv. We don't start the new year because we haven't found any Aviv barley. Okay. Now let's say we go March 3rd, we'll say 2 days after the new moon, looking for Aviv barley again, and now we find Aviv barley. Okay. So what does that mean? That means the next month is going to be the Chodesh Aviv. We have to now wait a whole month, even though we found it on March 3rd, even though it's only 2 days after the last moon. Right, the last new moon. Now we have to wait until the next new moon. Let's say it comes. It's not going to come on April 1st, but I'm just simplifying it. Let's say the next new moon is on April 1st. Now that we've already found our Aviv barley on March 3rd, you have to wait all the way until April 1st and then declare that the Chodesh Aviv. Right. Well, in that time, if we've already found the Aviv barley on March 3rd, on that time the barley would have already ripened. The harvest of the barley would have already started, because you can't just let it sit there on the stalks. And we'd already be harvesting our barley, let's say in the middle of March. If the time difference between the Aviv, between the time that barley is Aviv and the time that it's ripe is approximately 2 weeks, is approximately 15 days, as let's say some Karaites claim, then the barley harvest already would have started in the middle of March. They're not just going to leave it on the stalks and wait until a month later to start the barley harvest, right? So Ke'echel Cheremesh al Hakama already would have been before the beginning of what we would call the Chodesh Aviv. You see what I'm saying? Hello? I see the ceiling fan spinning, but I don't hear any Bruce. Bruce, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay, I'm looking for something that spoke to me so clearly, and I think it's at the end of the Parshat HaShavua. And let me see if I can find it, because it's directly related to this, because the whole thing about finding a little bit of Aviv barley, you recall that I had a big argument, not only with the rabbis, but with the Karaites, with everyone in the world. I was arguing with everyone in the world.
I remember it very well.
Right. That I said there was no Aviv barley except a tiny little bit in an obscure field
Right.
way up north, somewhere near Afula.
Right. Right.
And I said, we have to postpone. We have to have an Adar Gimel. And I.
Right. Oh, there goes Bruce. Bruce? I don't know what happened. Bruce? Hello? All right, I'm going to remove Bruce because I think something bad happened, and I'll just re-add him. Bruce?
Or near the end, maybe it was the second aliyah from the end, where it was talking about bringing sacrifices.
Mm-hmm.
No, where is that? I'm sorry, I should have been.
It's okay.
We're in Shoftim now, right?
Yeah.
It's Shoftim, okay.
Yes.
Okay, so maybe it wasn't the very last parsha, but the parsha before, maybe the sixth aliyah, not the parsha, the aliyah. Maybe it was the sixth aliyah.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I found a couple things. I don't know if you can see, me, but I wrote out a bunch of little strips.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you can see this. It's the beginning.
Okay.
Right. It's the beginning of the sixth aliyah. In English, it's "You shall not pull back your neighbor's landmark."
Right.
You may or may not know that they stole my building plot, my good Jewish neighbors here.
Yeah, I remember.
Right. So I made a bunch of these. I wanted to put them in everyone's mailbox.
I love it. But really, what you should do is you should get an ink pad and a stamp, and you should get like a couple of biryonim, and you should hold each person down in the shuv and then stamp it on their forehead.
Huh.
That would be a better idea.
Okay, so maybe fight the officers. Why can't
when you find it?
I'm sorry. I'll keep looking while you.
It's a big book. It's sometimes it's sometimes hard to find things.
No, it was in this Parshat HaShavua.
No, I understand that, but even that, that's why sometimes it's best to you can consult with Rabbi Google. Sometimes helps.
But I don't remember exactly what I'm looking for. But I'll find.
I'm going to go on in the meantime. All right, if you let me know.
Go on.
Okay. All right, so at any rate, yeah. So that's that. Okay, Techel Spor Shivat Shavuot, verse 10. ועשית חג שבועות ליהוה אלוהיך משאת נדבות ידך אשר תיתן כאשר יברכך יהוה אלוהיך. Okay, verse 11. שמחת לפני יהוה אלוהיך אתה ובנך ובתך לעבדך ועמתך ועלוי אשר בשעריך וגר ויתום ואלמנה אשר בקרבך במקום אשר יבחר יהוה אלוהיך לשכן שמו שם. So this is interesting. We've seen this phrase. I spoke about it last week. This is samachta, rejoice, and you rejoice with your son, your daughter, your manservant, your maidservant. We had the Levi, asher b'sharecha. That was last time. I think in one place the ger was mentioned, and another place the levi was mentioned, if I remember correctly. But now we have the addition of the hayatom ve'almana. Okay, so all of these go together. Okay, these are all downtrodden classes, or classes that do not have a high status in Israel. Son and daughter, because they're not fully grown, they're not fully independent. But then your male servants, your female servants, the Levite. Okay, why? And it says in last week's parsha, because this is last week's parsha, the beginning of last week's parsha, that because he does not have an inheritance in the land. Okay, as the other 12 tribes do. The ger, we know is considered a downtrodden class. And then now we have the addition this time of the yatom almana, the how do you say yatom in English again? The orphan and the widow. A lot to say about this verse, but I want to move on. Okay. V'zacharta ki eved hayita b'Misrayim v'shamarta v'asita et hachukim ha'chukim ha'ele. Great. Now we get up to Hagasukot. Hagasukot ta'aseh lecha shiv'at yomim ba'asvacha mi garantcha u'mi yikabecha. Okay, Goren is we just saw it before, threshing floor, and a Yakev is a wine press. Okay. So this is kind of weird. I'd have to look into it myself, but just a question that occurred to me. So why are we bringing in from the threshing floor? Why are we bringing in from the threshing floor in the time of Sukkot, right? We have basically, there are two main grain harvests in Israel, and one is basically around Hagamatzot, and that's the barley harvest, right? It's or the Omer offering is the barley harvest, and then the next is Shavuot, which is associated with the wheat harvest. I'm sorry, I should put this back on this thing. And but here it says Sukkot time that we're bringing things in from the threshing floor. Well, the threshing floor is only going to relate basically to the barley and the wheat harvest. Yes, there were other things like spelt and maybe rye and trigonella, which is like an early form of wheat. That might be the only form of wheat back then, growing in the Middle East. But at any rate, why would we be bringing in from the Gordon, from the threshing floor? So what is the threshing floor, right? We have to understand what the threshing floor is. You take the bundles of wheat, the omers of wheat, and you throw them on the floor of these threshing floors, and then you crush them. I think this was usually done with these big wheels that were driven by oxen, and then you crush them. And then you winnow them. You take all of what is left, and you throw it up in the air, and the seeds are going to come down on the floor, and the chaff is gonna go away with the wind. It's going to be gone with the wind. An analogy of the separation of the wheat and chaff that's used many times in the Tanakh, right? And then what's left are the grains. So why would you carry in from your threshing floor at Sukkot time? This already would have been done much earlier in the season. Again, the barley harvest would be April-ish, and the wheat harvest would be around June or so, right? So the only thing I can think of, I don't know the answer. I'm just asking this out loud. Maybe if somebody knows the answer, they could tell me. But the only thing I could think of is that maybe they now let the seeds just sit during the summer to dry further. And then in the harvest time, they bring them inside because this is ba'asfacha, right? So maybe they bring them inside for winter storage, or to be ground up into flour or something along those lines. It strikes me as a bit strange that it would be speaking about taking in from your threshing floor in the time of Sukkot. Okay, I don't have an answer to the question. I'm just raising the question myself. Bruce, anything you want to add, or did you find the thing that you were looking for?
Yes, I did. Okay. It's in the third Aliyah, where it's talking about the Levites, that the Levites have no portion or inheritance with Israel. So the Lord's fire offerings and his inheritance they shall eat.
Right.
But he shall have no inheritance among his brothers. The Lord is his inheritance, as he spoke to him. And this shall be the Kohanim's due from the people, from those who perform a slaughter, be it an ox or a sheep. He shall give the Kohen the foreleg, the jaws, and the maw. The first of your grain, this is probably barley, your wine, your oil, and the first of the fleece of your sheep, you shall give him. So these were the Kohanim, the Levites, that were waiting for the sacrifice to be brought to the temple, and they would be given a portion of it. So if it were like the people that were arguing with me were saying, no, Bruce, this is not a general feast, a general sacrifice where everybody partakes. This was one specific demonstration of the barley being offered in the temple, not for people to consume. But here it's saying, yes, it's for the Levites to get a part of it. So how can you begin the Passover with the sacrifice and bringing the barley if it's only one demonstration and not to be shared?
I think I missed your point. Could you just summarize?
Okay, the argument that was made to me was that you don't need a lot of barley. You don't need all the fields throughout Israel to be ripened so that everyone can bring their barley sacrifice to the temple. It just needs to be one little package of barley and you have a national demonstration. But nobody partakes. That's what they were saying. And I'm saying, that's interesting. I never thought of it that way. I always
we've had this discussion before. Now I got it.
Okay, so here it says that the Kohanim, you bring the sacrifices so that the Levites can be part of it and get the first of your grain, your wine, and your oil, and the first of the fleece of your sheep you shall give him. I don't know, it just seems to support.
That's referring to the tithes. That's it's two different things. So the Omer offering, I believe, I remember we spoke about this issue right back in the springtime when we were dealing with Aviv.
Right.
And I looked into it myself, but I think that really it is a symbolic, it's one Omer that's waived by the Kohen. Not that everyone brings their own Omer offering and then they start, because if it were, then everyone would be celebrating Shavuot on a different day, which doesn't make any sense, right? Because the Omer offering is linked to Shavuot. The day after you bring the Omer, you have to bring the Omer offering on a Sunday, according to us Karaites, right? And then you start counting your 7 Shabbats, and then you celebrate Shavuot. So if everyone brought their own Omer offering, depending on when their field was ripe, then we'd have a whole bunch of different Omer offerings stretching over a whole bunch of different times. Everyone would start counting the Omer at a different time, and then everyone would be celebrating Shavuot at a different time, which is not possible.
Okay, I think what you're saying actually supports my approach, that all the fields have to be ripe.
Okay.
And then you start counting.
I don't know if all the fields have to be ripe. Maybe just the first field has to be ripe. Maybe there just has to be one field that's brought as the beginning to kick off the barley harvest. Not that we wait around for all of the fields to be ripe, because it is a chel chermei bakama. We just saw this here in Deuteronomy, right?
Yeah. Then what you're saying is that everybody's going to have Shavuot at a different time.
No, I'm saying they won't. I'm saying that when the barley harvest nationwide starts, okay, they just, let's say there's a certain time where the Kohanim or whoever might have, let's say it's the Kohanim, it seems like something the Kohanim would declare. They're going to say, okay, we have enough, we have enough ripe barley fields at this point. The day after this coming Shabbat is going to be the day of the Omer offering. Okay, and they gather an Omer together, which is symbolically waved before God as to kick off the new agricultural season, the agricultural season of this new year, right? We're still ostensibly in the month of the Aviv, right? Mm-hmm. And then once that is done, then nationwide the count commences, the Omer count commences for 49 days, and then the 50th day is Shavuot. And during that time, other barley fields start ripening, and people bring their first fruits, but not as an Omer offering. They're bringing their first fruits, like you said, to the Levites and the Kohanim, because that's tithing, right? 10% the tithe has to go to as a tithe, right?
Okay, so you're saying it's irrelevant, but
I'm saying it's two different things. I'm saying that when it speaks about the first fruits, right? And I think the verse you quoted, it didn't say, it said the first fruits of the grains, I think it said other things as well, right?
I don't know. It just seems to me that everybody would be bringing their barley.
We're supposed to bring first fruits of everything to God. God gets the first fruits of everything, of all of our crops, of our animals, the firstborn of our animals, right? We tithe all of this, all of the harvest to God, right? But God can't eat fruits and vegetables, and he doesn't want a double whopper, or a quarter pounder. He can't eat it. So our gifts to him go to the Kohanim and the Levites, and that's basically the tithing system, okay? Or in the sacrificial system, on some of the sacrifices, they take parts of the sacrifice and they eat it, right? In some cases, it's burnt. The oleh is burnt completely on the altar, but there are other sacrifices. I'd have to go back and look in the beginning of Leviticus now, or look at the list that I made. But some sacrifices are eaten by the Levites, and some sacrifices are eaten partially by the Levites and partially by the person who brought the sacrifice. Right. So this is the way the Levites and the Kohanim are paid. They're paid through the tithes, and they're paid through the portions of the sacrifices which they get to eat, because they do not have a land inheritance. Right. They were not given a portion of the land.
Melech, that's precisely what I'm saying. When they come on the Pesach pilgrimage, what are they eating? The Kohanim and the Levites have to go on a diet? No. All the people should be bringing their barley offering because it's right.
They are.
You're saying they don't. I'm saying it seems like they should.
No, they do, but not as an Omer offering, as a tithe.
Okay, not as an Omer offering, but as some kind of offering.
Right, as the tithe. That's the tithing system, but it's different from the Omer offering.
Okay.
And I just want to respond to what Ethan Avior is saying here. So
how did they make?
Years,
wait a minute. How did they make matzah? They're eating matzah for 7 days. How did they make matzah? Out of wheat or out of barley?
I would assume actually out of barley.
Out of barley, of course, out of barley. Yeah. So if you're supposed to feast on matzah and eat matzah only, then the barley has to be ripe.
Of course.
Ta-da! I rest
unless you're making the matzah from last year's harvest, from last year's stored grain.
Okay, that's another story.
Right, and then it could even be from wheat. Maybe you bring.
Okay, so then that's the question.
Mm-hmm.
When you're celebrating Passover, you're making it from year-old barley, or you're making it from the present year's barley?
The Torah doesn't tell us that we have to make it from the present year's barley. The Torah only tells us that we're not allowed to eat the harvests of the new year, and the barley harvest would be first until we first bring the Omer offering. It tells us that explicitly in Leviticus 23.
Right. Okay, so then that's the question. What did the people in ancient Israel eat in Jerusalem? Did they eat the last year's wheat and barley, or did they eat the present year's barley in their matzah?
We don't know. I can't think of anything that would point to it that would point to it specifically, except to say once again that there's no law in the Torah that explicitly says that we have to make the matzah for Chag HaMatzot out of the current year's barley harvest.
Okay, I assume that that they would be using the current year's barley.
Not necessarily.
Okay, that's what you say.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, it's a nice assumption, but really, honestly, it doesn't necessarily follow through, because let's say that let's take the opposite of the example I gave before, where we find Aviv barley. The first Aviv field we find is a day before the new moon, and then now it's the new moon, and now 2 weeks later maybe that field is ripe, but most of the fields in Israel are still not ripe. Then you're not going to have enough of that year's barley ripe to turn into matzah for the entire nation on Chag HaMatzot. So I think the two are actually separated. If you ask me.
I'll tell you what, jury is still out.
Sure.
When I get to Iowa in October, I'm going to ask my Amish people,
right?
What do they think?
Okay. You're Amish people. You own Amish people.
My own Amish people. Yeah.
No, I said you own. You said my Amish people. Like you own. You are in possession of Amish people.
They took possession of me.
My Amish people.
No, I kind of.
You're not going to turn into an Amish, are you, honest Bruce?
I'm Hamish, not Amish.
There you go. All right. Let's move on a little bit in Deuteronomy. Okay. Again, I'm going to mute the mic. And okay, we haven't even gotten to this week's parsha. So you know what I'm going to do? I always say I'm going to do this, but I never can. All right. Let's continue reading a bit. I'll probably stop in about a half an hour or so. So Shivat Shavuot tispar lach me'echel chemesh bakama techel lispor Shivat Shavuot ועשית חג שבועות ליהוה אלוהיך מצד נדבת ידך אשר תיתן כאשר יברכך יהוה אלוהיך. Verse 11. ושמחת לפני יהוה אלוהיך אתה ובנך. Oh, we read this already. Let's go to 12. וזכרת כי עבד היית במצרים ושמרת ועשית את החוקים האלה. We read that as well. Oh, we read this as well. What were we up to? Okay, we were up to here. Migoroncha miyekabetcha. Okay, verse 14. Actually, just excuse me for 2 minutes. Bruce, would you mind reading for a couple of minutes? I just have to do something very briefly.
I got to find it. What?
We're in Deuteronomy 16. You could start on 13. 16:13.
What aliyah? 16. Oh.
We're not even up to this week's parsha. This week's parsha starts in 18. I've been a bad boy. I went to do a little bit of background and I got bogged down as always.
Okay,
oh well.
sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah. I can't read it. It's too small.
How about now? Or you can read it from your own Tanakh.
No, I don't have Deuteronomy. That's the one I'm missing.
Okay. It
It
sounds like a rabbinical Beit Knesset. You're missing the Tanakh.
Okay, where do you want me to read from?
You could start in Deuteronomy. You know the old joke that I always tell, Bruce?
What's that?
What's the hardest book to find in a rabbinical Beit Knesset?
The hardest book to find?
Yeah, in a rabbinical Beit Knesset.
The Torah.
The Tanakh. The Tanakh.
The Tanakh.
Yeah, you'll find everything but the Tanakh. You'll find Rashi. You'll find Mesilat Yesharim. You'll find everything.
Yeah, especially Nach.
Right. Especially.
Right.
All right, so go ahead. Just give me a couple minutes. I just have to take care of one thing. You can start reading in Deuteronomy 16:13.
16?
16:13. Yeah, verse 13. Chapter 15.
Still very small.
All right. Well,
Hag HaSukkot ta'aseh lecha shivat yamim ve'asfecha megar necha. It's very hard for me to read. ומיקבך, ושמחת בחגיך אתה ובנך וביתך ועבדיך ואמתך והלוי והגר והיתום והאלמנה אשר בשעריך. 7 ימים תחוג ליוה אלוהיך במקום אשר יבחר יוה, כי יברכך יוה אלוהיך בכל תבואתך ובכל מעשה ידיך, והייתה אך שמח. 3 פעמים בשנה יראה כל זכורך את פני יוה אלוהיך במקום אשר יבחר, בחג המצות ובחג השבועות ובחג הסוכות, ולא יראה את פני יוה ריקם. איש כמתנת ידו כברכת יוה אלוהיך אשר נתן לך.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. All right. I just have to do something for a couple of minutes here, and I'll be right back. So, Bruce, you want to take over for about 5 minutes, or talk about whatever you want? Tell us about your book.
Okay. You know what? First, I'll mention something that I just read. I think it's the hardest commandment in Torah. Was what I just read. V'samachta b'chagecha, and you shall be joyful on your holiday. How do you do that? Say you had some kind of tragedy, personal or in your family. How can God force you to be happy? It seems like an impossible commandment to always follow. And so, to my way of thinking, this is the hardest commandment in the Torah. V'samachta b'chagecha.
I hear you. I'm listening.
Okay, how many people are in the room? Who am I speaking to?
I don't know. It doesn't always show up the number correctly, so it's not clear.
Okay, because I can talk about my book, but I don't know if I'm talking to anybody who wants to hear about it.
Well, go for it. I want to hear about it.
Okay, but I think you've heard everything about it already. You were encouraging me to write it almost from the very outset. You were one of the people who put a proverbial fire under my proverbial tuchus to put pen to paper and write. And I don't know if I should be thankful or if I should be mad at you. But the book is done. The book is done. The final touches are being made to it. It was proofread, and the mistakes that were found by the proofreader were incorporated into the body of the manuscript. by the graphic artist who's doing the layout. And now it's the proofreader and my job to make sure that all the corrections of the proofreader have been properly incorporated into the text.
Yeah, but Bruce, tell us what the book is about.
A minor detail. Okay, again, I don't know who's listening or if you would be interested in this. It's basically what I would call a historical memoir with importance in current and future events. So it's not just a history. In fact, that's one of the people who reviewed it, a brigadier general from the United States Army, said something to that effect, that it's not only instructive historically, but it impinges on the present and future. Okay, now what was the book about? What is the book about? And it's hard for me to say on one leg, but I'll try and be as brief as possible.
All right.
Back in the early 1970s, as Melech may remember, he was just a little boy then, but I was less than a little boy. I was draft age, and all of us little boys who were draft age were not eager to be drafted and sent to Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
And personally, I had a college deferment through the late 1960s. And in the early 1970s, I had what's called a teaching deferment. And that was a strong deferment to keep out of the Army. However, I was so lucky in 1970 when they instituted the draft lottery. I was a winner, quote unquote. And I knew that I was going to be drafted. And I took a battery of tests and I aced the language aptitude test. And they gave me a choice. You can have language of your choice. What would you like? Cambodian, Laotian, Vietnamese, Chinese, or Arabic? Thank you very much. Arabic is the furthest away from Vietnam. I'll take Arabic. So I was trained as an Arabic linguist and I worked at NSA. And now we're getting to the meat of my story. We at NSA knew that Egypt and Syria were going to attack Israel in a surprise attack in October of 73. There were false alarms prior to that, months prior to that. A big one in February of that year, another big one in May of that year. We knew that these were false alarms. But in October, we knew that this one was real. My supervisor, in his words, which can compete with those of William Shakespeare, Brill, the shit hits the fan on Saturday.
Wow. That's crazy.
And so not only did we know days in advance, not only did we know for a certainty, but we even knew the day that the attack was going to happen. And on the first day of the Yom Kippur War, I was working, listening to, monitoring live military communications from the battlefront. And I picked up an Israeli soldier who was stationed on the Bar-Lev line along the Suez Canal. He called his mother frantically, told her that we're under a surprise attack.
Wow.
Please call my girlfriend tell her that I'm okay, take the car quickly to the gas station, fill it up with gas, and other such things. But the important part of that conversation was I heard that he and his buddies were caught by surprise.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew something that he should have known if we shared the intelligence with him. Right. So on the first day of the war, I knew that we didn't get the intelligence that we had to that Israeli soldier on the front line.
Yeah, wow.
And I said to myself, and I wasn't religious, I wasn't Orthodox. There I was working on Yom Kippur.
Right.
I said to myself, my God, I'm wearing the wrong uniform. And I promised myself that I would come to Israel.
Wow.
Okay, so that's the first part of my disclosure. The second part of the disclosure was, why didn't we get the intelligence to our allies, the Israelis, on time? I assumed that we delayed in getting the intelligence to the Israelis until I stumbled upon a New York Times article disclosing what happened at the Pike Commission inquiry, congressional inquiry. It was called the Pike Commission. It was Otis Pike from Long Island in the congressional district next to where I grew up.
Yeah.
And the head of NSA and the heads of the other intelligence agencies testified before Congress. The Arabs fooled us. We didn't know. I said, what? We did know. I'm on the ground floor. I wasn't a general. I wasn't even an officer. I wasn't even a sergeant. And I knew. Yeah. How does the head of the intelligence agencies testify before Congress that they didn't know? How could that be? It's impossible.
Yep.
Disclosure number 3. I was invited to the home of Israeli General Eli Ze'ira, the head of Israel military intelligence.
Bruce, that's not the one where you asked him if he served in Tzal and Tachtonim, is it?
No, no. I asked him, did the Americans pass to you intelligence that the Arabs were not going to attack? And he answered me, yes.
Wow.
So not only didn't we pass the intelligence on time, but we passed false intelligence.
Is he still alive? And did he allow you to confirm this in the book?
He is 95 years old today. Actually, he might be 96. I don't know when his birthday is.
Right.
And he's still alive.
Wow.
He and Kissinger are the same age, and he and Kissinger are both still alive.
Well, Kissinger's 99.
Say what?
Kissinger is 99. I just saw an article a couple of weeks ago. He just turned 99.
Really? I thought he was 95 also.
No.
Okay. I could be mistaken about him. But Ze'ira is 95, maybe 96.
Yeah.
And I went to Haaretz with this bombshell that not only didn't we notify the Israelis or notify them on time, but we gave the head of Israeli military intelligence a false assessment.
Right.
on purpose, knowingly. So I went to Haaretz with this. And the military editor, he said, "Did you record him?" And I said, "No." He said, "Did you have a witness there?" I said, "No." He said, "Nobody's going to believe you."
So much for your buddy Michael Oren over there wrote a book called Ally. So much for the great Ally.
I never read his book. I don't know what he says.
I read it. I actually should I even admit this on air? I ripped it off from Barnes and Nobles back in the United States because I refused to pay for one of his books because I'm not a very big fan of his.
Okay, so maybe after reading my book, he should rewrite his own.
I swiped it from Barnes and Nobles. I'm very.
But listen to this. Listen to this.
Yeah.
June 6th, 2021.
Yep.
Released from the IDF military archives, a protocol from Moshe Dayan.
Yeah.
On October 7th, the day after the war began, he said that 12 hours before the Arabs attacked, 12 hours, he got an intelligence assessment from the Americans that the Arabs are not going to attack. Wow. Precisely what Eliezer Era told me. That was unbelievable.
Wow. Unbelievable. Really? It really is.
So you know what, Melech, with that, and with two other things that were maybe less important,
right?
I went back to the Pentagon, and I told them this was just released from the IDF military archives. I want to include this in my book. I have to include this in my book. They said, then our authorization is no longer valid unless we go through a second review. So I sent them that and two other items that I wanted to include in my book, but particularly that. And it went through another month and a half review, and my book has been approved for publication twice by the Pentagon.
All right, Bruce, I'm listening. So that's your book. It's coming out in soon. You're going to be going on a tour in the United States, signing and giving talks, giving lectures about your book, and it's amazing. Really, I'm really glad you wrote it. I can't wait to read it. Honestly, I'm going to read it from cover to cover.
Oh, one of the people who reviewed it, I didn't even mention to you.
Yeah.
Is the assistant rector,
yes,
rector of Tel Aviv University, a well-known and well-respected historian, Eyal Zisser. Israelis, any academic Israeli has heard of Eyal Zisser. Big name.
Excellent.
And I even asked if I could use his review as the foreword in my Hebrew version. And he agreed.
Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing. So you're going to translate his forward to English, or in your Hebrew version of the book?
In the Hebrew version, yeah. I don't think it would speak to most English speakers. They wouldn't know who he is, but Israelis do.
Right. I got you. Oh, very good. Well, we're waiting for you. So when is it planned? When is it going to be coming out exactly, or more or less?
I don't know.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right.
I wanted to come out yesterday, but we'll see.
Right. Exactly. All right. Well, I think what we're going to do here, let me finish reading down to at least through the end of Deuteronomy 16 here. Okay. And discussing if there's anything to discuss. So we'll start back in 16. So shalosh pa'amim b'shana yira'eh kol zechurcha et pnei Yahweh Elohecha b'makom asher yivchar b'chag hamatzot. Oh, I have to put this back on this thingy. There we go. בחג שבועות ובחג הסוכות ולא יראה את פני יהוה ריקם. איש כמתנת ידו כברכת יהוה אלוהיך אשר נתן לך. And now we start this week's parsha. שופטים ושוטרים תיתן לך בכל שעריך אשר יהוה אלוהיך נותן לך לשבטיך ושבתו let me just do it this way. ושפטו את העם משפט צדק. לא תטה משפט, לא תכיר פנים ולא תיקח שוחד, כי השוחד יעוור עיני חכמים ויסלף דברי צדיקים. Verse 20. Famous verse. Tzedek tirdof. You shall certainly chase after righteousness or pursue righteousness. Lema'an tichayeh uyarashta et haaretz asher Yahweh Elohecha noten lach. Let me just see one thing here. Okay, verse 21. V'lo tita lecha ashera kol eitz אצל מזבח יהוה אלוהיך אשר תעשה לך ולא תקים לך מצבה אשר שונא יהוה אלוהיך. So an Asherah is it's an Asherah tree. It's basically a tree that's used as it's basically a female fertility goddess that was used in a lot of the surrounding cultures. Okay, Deuteronomy 17. לא תזבח ליהוה אלוהיך שור ועשה אשר יהיה בו מום כל דבר רע כי תועבת יהוה אלוהיך הוא. Verse 2. כי ימצא בקרבך באחד שעריך אשר יהוה אלוהיך נותן לך איש או אישה אשר יעשה את הרע בעיני יהוה אלוהיך לעבור בריתו וילך ויעבוד אלוהים אחרים וישתחו להם ולשמש או לירח או לכל צבא השמיים אשר לא ציוויתי. הוגד לך ושמעת ודרשת היטב והנה אמת נכון הדבר נעשתה התועבה הזאת בישראל. One second. One second here. Yeah, okay. This one's, I read this in last week's parsha. Maybe I went ahead last week. Okay. Well, Seta et ha'ish hahu or et ha'isha hahi asher asu et hadavar hara hazeh el she'arecha et ha'ish or et ha'isha v'salaktam v'sekaltam be'avanim wa'metu al pi שניים עדים או שלושה עדים יומת המת לא יומת על פי עד אחד יד העדים תהיה בו בראשונה להמיתו ויד כל העם באחרונה וביארת הרע מקרבך. Okay, I'm having deja vu. I could have sworn we did this last week. What is going on here? One second here. Give me 1 second, please.
No problema.
I don't know why I think we read this last week. Okay, I'm still going to go on. At any rate, okay. כי יפלא ממך דבר למשפט בין דם לדם ובין דין לדין ובין נגע לנגע דברי ריבות בשעריך וקמת ועלית אל המקום אשר יבחר יהוה אלוהיך בו. These are very famous verses. This verse right here is very famous for the Karaites. ובאת אל הכהנים הלוויים ואל השופט אשר יהיה בימים ההם ודרשת ויגידו לך את דבר המשפט. So I won't even mention why I think I spoke about it last week. ועשית על פי הדבר אשר יגידו לך מן המקום ההוא אשר יבחר יהוה ושמרת לעשות ככל אשר יורוך. So to make it very brief, this is Deuteronomy 17:9. One of these iconic verses for the Karaites. The Rabbinites will often use this verse as a polemic against the Karaites to say that this proves that the rabbis have authority, because it says specifically, you shall go to the Kohanim, the Levite, and the judge, asher yeh b'yamim hahem, that will be in those days. So the rabbis use this as a polemic to say, well, that this means that the judges in each particular generation can not only judge the people, but they can they can interpret Torah law. They can basically legislate from the bench. To make a long story short, is what the rabbis use this verse to say. Okay, they say that this proves that the rabbis have the right to interpret the Torah as they see fit, to discontinue laws, to change laws, to add new laws, because it says that if a court case is too difficult and you can't solve it bisha'arecha, remember we saw the word earlier, bisha'arecha always means in your cities, right? Then you go to we always have this contrast between bisha'arecha, which means in your local area, your local courts, your local city, and okay, the place which God shall choose. Okay, so let me translate this word for word. Let me start it in verse 8. If it's too difficult or if it's too wondrous for you, a matter of judgment, ben dam ledam, between blood and blood. Not sure exactly what that means. Nobody knows exactly what this means. Ben din ledin, ben nega lenega. Okay, so dam ledam could mean issues of people spilling each other's blood. Or it could have to do something to do with let's say the blood that let's say of menstrual blood that makes one impure. I think it really has to do with spilling blood of one another. Ben din ledin. Well, din is kind of a general statement, and they translate it here actually as judgment. Nega lenega. So nega is well, actually, they translate it here as punishment, but nega also can refer to a disease, like a leprosy, not leprosy. What we usually translate as leprosy, as sora'at. What's usually translated as leprosy, but often is more correctly translated as scale disease. At any rate, so it's not clear whether it's speaking about issues of purity and impurity, or it's speaking about just general issues of any kind of problem that occurs between people. I mean, the context here is whatever happens in any case cannot be solved in the cities. Okay, and there it says divrei ribot. So it really probably has to do with this divrei ribot. Riv is an argument or a conflict, right? So any matter of conflict. So then this would inform us that these things over here, that the dam, din, and nega really are issues of conflict between people. But in general, whatever can't be solved bisha'arecha in the local cities, that you shall arise and go up to the place which Yahweh your God shall choose. Okay, meaning Jerusalem when it's later chosen, as we saw in the end of the book of Samuel 2. Ubate el kohanim, and you shall come to the kohanim, aliwiim, wela shofet. You come to the kohen, the Levite, and the shofet. So each of these, I think the kohanim and the Levites, they're going to deal more with issues of, let's say, purity, impurity, stuff like that. And the shofet is going to deal more with issues of conflict. Okay, asher yeh biyamim hahem, who will be in those days. So you go to the Kohen, the Levite, and the judge that are in Jerusalem, that are in the place which God has chosen in those days. Udarashta, okay, and you shall seek it out, or seek out the answer, or maybe seek out the judges. Wahigidu lecha et devar mishpat, and they shall tell you the matter of the judgment. They shall decide the case for you. So once again, the rabbis say, oh, because it says biyamim hahem, you go to the judge biyamim hahem, that this means that each generation, whoever the judges are, they have the right to basically do whatever they want with the Torah. They can just, fling it around in any direction that they want. Okay, and this is a very standard polemic. If you ever are a Karaite arguing with a Rabbinite about Karaism versus Rabbinism, this will always be brought up. But of course, that's not what it means. It certainly doesn't give the rabbis carte blanche to do whatever the heck they want with the Torah, right? But they say it is. I'll point very quickly to a see here, to an article that I have on Karaite Insights. I did not write this article. It was given to me many years ago by a friend, but it basically explores this very idea. Let me see if I can find it. Here, was there a Pharisaic revolution against the old order? And I will post this. I will post the link to this. It's a brilliant article, and I can say it because I did not write it myself. So I'm going to post that link in the comments, and I'll bring it up here. Okay, if anybody wants to look at it, I highly recommend it. It deals with this very issue about how the rabbis don't have the right. What basically the rabbis are claiming for themselves by this verse is that they have the right to legislate from the bench in any generation as they see fit. They are the final arbiters, not only of just judging what the Torah, the written Torah says, but of interpreting it and changing it by extension in any way that they see fit. So it's basically now they have a big argument in the United States, the left wing versus the right wing, shall we say, or the conservatives versus the liberals, the left versus the right, where they're talking about originalism versus I can't remember what they call the opposite, but where the right wing basically holds to the idea of originalism, whereby you have to interpret the Constitution based on what it actually says. You can't start innovating and creating laws that are outside of the realm of the Constitution. And the others, which are the more liberal, there was a certain name for it, but the more liberal interpretation of the Constitution basically says that you can, the Constitution can be played with in a significant way. That basically it's the basis, but it can be altered, interpreted differently. It can be interpreted in a way that's very far from the meaning of the original text, right? So I'll call them the anti-originalists. I can't remember. There's another more official name for them. So the originalists versus the anti-originalists. So the rabbis are the anti-originalists. They're the liberals. They're the leftists. They are the Democrats. And we, the Karaites, are the originalists. We stick to the meaning of our Constitution, to the original meaning of our Constitution. We are the Republicans, well, not the rhinos, but let's say the more MAGA types. We are the right wing. We are the originalists. We believe in the written Torah, and that you have to stick close to the original intention of the Torah. So this is an extremely, extremely important verse when it comes down to Karaism. Let me take this away. So I think I'll just read a little bit more, and then we're going to end for the day. I'll try to read down to the end of this chapter. So verse 10, but that is extremely important verse, Deuteronomy 17:9. Verse 10, وَعَسِيتَ عَلْ-פِي هَدَوَارْ أَشَرْ يَعِيدُ لَخَا مِنْ هَمَقَوْمْ هَهُ أَشَرْ يِبْحَرْ يَحْوَهِ وَشَمَرْتَ الْعَصَوْتْ كَخَوْلْ أَشَرْ يُرُوخَا. Verse 11, על-פי התורה אשר יורוך ועל המשפט אשר יאמרו לך תעשה לא תסור מן הדבר אשר יגידו לך ימין ושמאל. והאיש אשר יעשה בזדון לבלתי שמוע אל הכהן העומד לשרת שם את יהוה אלוהיך או אל השופט. And remember, another point to point out is that this shofet that they're talking about, this basically is not, this is the shofet he's in the Beit HaMikdash, okay? This is not just, some random judge. This is the head judge, okay? We know that in the time of Moshe, up through basically until both the northern and southern kingdom were destroyed, there was always one head of the state who acted as the main shofet. In the time of Moses, it was Moses. In the time of then, it was passed on to Joshua, and then after Joshua, it was passed on to the Shoftim. That's where we have Sefer Shoftim, and we know the various Shoftim, which I can't at offhand name in order, but we have like Gidon and Ehud and Shimshon and all of the rest of the famous judges from the book of Judges, and then it was originally and then it was eventually passed on to Shmuel. He was the head. To Samuel. He was the head shofet. And then at that point, Israel demanded a king, and now it switched over. That head shofet role switched over to the king. The king was not generally a prophet. Maybe he had dreams, but he was not on the level of a prophet. So first it was Shaul, David, Solomon, and then the kingdom split. But the king at that point was the head shofet. So we're not talking about just some random guy who can do whatever he wants. We're talking about either someone who was a prophet or someone who had access to prophets in the case of the kings like Saul, David, and Samuel. So that's what we're talking about, the shofet. The rabbis certainly do not fit that category at all. They don't fit that criteria at all. They have and had no access to prophecy, no direct access to God, and that's exactly what gave them the cover by which they could, the cover by which they could basically do whatever the heck they wanted with the Torah and distort it, alter it, and ultimately destroy it for the people of Israel. Okay, so right, verse 12, "Wahaish asher yaseh bezadon levilti shimoah el hakohen ha'omed lisharet sham et Yahweh Elohecha o el hashofet umet ha'ish hahu ubi'arta hara me'Yisrael." Okay, so anyone who disobeys that main judge or the Kohen or the Levite, the head Kohen and or the maybe there was a head Levite or the head judge is put to death. Okay, verse 14. כי תבוא אל הארץ אשר יהוה אלוהיך נותן לך וירשת וישבת בה ואמרת אשימה עלי מלך ככל הגויים אשר סביבותי. We were just talking about this, right? In the beginning of 2 Samuel, the nation clamors for a king, right? They want a king like all of the rest of the nations. And then Samuel gives them a whole long speech of the consequences of that. And in the end, they still want it. So they get Shaul. Okay. Sum tasim alecha melech asher yivchar Yahweh Elohecha bo makerev achecha. And it says that the king should come mikerev achecha, from among your brothers. Achecha always means a native born, or shall we say a bloodline Israelite. When it says the word ach, it means kin. Okay, that's the translation of the word kin. So so you cannot have a king who is a ger, or is a descendant of a ger, or who is a foreigner. It must be from from a bloodline Israelite, someone who is bloodline descended from Jacob. Tasim alecha melech lo tuchal latet alav ish nochri asher lo achicha hu. Okay, ach, it means brother, literally, but it's often used by extensions. They usually translate it as kin. Oh, so much to say about these verses. I wish we had more time. Rak lo yarbelo susim, walo yashiv et ha'am misraima, lema'an harbot sus, wa Yahweh amar lachem lo tosifun lashuv baderech hazeh od. Well, that's an interesting statement. I'm curious to see what Robert Alter might say about that one. That is Deuteronomy 17:16. Let's see. What does horses have to do with going back to Egypt? Maybe horses were a place where you bought, Egypt was a place where you bought horses. Let's see. The many horses, the many wives. Oh, geez. Try that again. Here it is. Okay, well, we'll start here. Okay. Oh boy. I don't know why it's doing it. All right. Hello. There we go. The many horses, the many wives, the silver and gold are all associated with the extravagances of royal, indeed imperial pomp. Egypt is linked with horses because of its celebrated chariot corps. There we go. Prominent in the Exodus story, and because it actually was an exporter of horses in the region. In fact, the Israelites were slow to adopt horses for travel and for warfare, through much of the First Temple period, preferring donkeys as mounts. But turning the people back to Egypt may refer to a condition of virtual or actual slavery to which a profligate monarch could reduce many of his overtaxed subjects through his expenditures. Shall not turn back again on this way. No explicit statement to this effect is recorded in the preceding books, though, as the Israeli Bible scholar David Cohen Zemach has proposed, there may be an approximation in Exodus 13:17, lest the people regret when they see battle and go back to Egypt. Okay? Interesting. Let's read this verse one more time. And I'm going to stop in about another 5 to 10 minutes. Rak lo yarbe lo susim wa lo yashiv et ha'am Mitzrayma lema'an harbot sus. Yahweh amar lachem lo tosifum lashuv baderech hazeh od. It sounds like, if I were to translate this, he should not multiply horses, and he shall not return the nation to Egypt in order to multiply horses. So it seems like we're talking about going down to Egypt to buy horses. And because God said, do not go on that road anymore. So I don't see okay, so it just seems to me that it's not talking about going back to Egypt to live, but going back to Egypt to buy horses. It's kind of a very strange thing. Let's look at one more interpretation. Let's look at the Ibn Ezra. So this is Deuteronomy 17:16. Ibn Ezra, Deuteronomy 17:16, and he says, okay, this was a commandment that was not written down. Our verse reads, as the Lord is in. The problem is that Scripture does not record such a command earlier. Okay. Some say that this law is derived from, ye shall not see them again no more forever. I'm not so sure about that. No, then this is already going on to something. So that's what the Ibn Ezra says. Okay. That it was not a commandment that was written down earlier, and that this is derived from Exodus 14:13. Okay, we're not going to go in that direction. We can look sometimes. I like to look at these other let's do it this way. So Deuteronomy 17. Let's go here. Oops, I have to do it a different way. Deuteronomy 17. How do I get to each individual verse? Oh boy. Right. Okay. Deuteronomy 17:16. Let's look at some of these other commentaries. So I go here to commentary. And let's see what they have to say about it. So Benson commentary, again, these are commentaries which I've not really heard of, but some of them are very nice, actually. Some of them very interesting. Though he might have horses for his own use, yet he was not to have many horses for his officers and guard, much less for war, lest he should trust in them. The multiplying horses is also forbidden, lest it should raise too great a correspondence with Egypt, which furnished Canaan with them. The Lord has said, the Lord has now said to me, and I buy. Okay. So again, that's the same idea that they're going to buy horses from Egypt. So Matthew Henry's concise commentary, God himself was in a particular manner Israel's king, and if they set another over them, it was necessary that he should choose the person accordingly. When the people desired a king, they applied to Samuel, a prophet of the Lord. In all cases, God's choice, if we can but know it, should direct, determine, and overrule ours. Laws are given for the prince that should be elected. He must carefully avoid everything that would turn him from God and from religion. Riches, honors, and pleasures are the three great hindrances of godliness: the lusts of the flesh, the lusts of the eye, and the pride of life, especially to those in high stations. Against these, the king is here warned. The king must carefully study the law of God and make that his rule, and having a copy. Okay, then it goes on to something else. The horse was not anciently used in the East for the purposes of agriculture or traveling, but ordinarily for war only. He appears constantly in Scripture as a symbol and embodiment of fleshly strength and the might of the creature, and is sometimes significantly spoken of simply as the strong one, compared to Jeremiah 8:16. The spirit of the prohibition, therefore, is not that the king of Israel must not, like other earthly potentates, put his trust in costly and formidable preparations for war. Egypt was one of the principal sources from where the nations of Western Asia drew their supplies of this animal. Compare Exodus 14:15, etc., etc. But contact, traffic, or alliance which would cause the people to return to Egypt would be to reverse the great and beneficent wonder work of God, which inaugurated the Mosaic covenant, the deliverance from the bondage of Egypt, and to bring about of set purpose that which God threatened. Deuteronomy 28:68 is the most severe punishment for Israel's sin. Okay. Okay, and this commentary, the Jamieson Fawcett Brown Bible commentary, says to increase intercourse with foreign nations, especially with Egypt, to the importation of an animal to which the character of the country was not suited, to the establishment of an oriental military despotism, to proud and pompous parade in peace, to a dependence upon Egypt in time of war, and a consequent withdrawal of trust and confidence in God. All right, so we get the idea. All right, let's go on just a little bit more, and I'm going to stop in just about 5 minutes. ולא ירבה לו נשים, ולא יסור לבבו, וכסף, וזהב לא ירבה לו מאוד. Verse 18. והיה כשבתו על כיסא ממלכתו, וכתב לו את משנה התורה הזאת על ספר מלפני הכהנים הלוויים. Okay? So he should make himself a copy. Let's look at how Robert altered, because some people say Mishneh Torah means Deuteronomy, only the book of Deuteronomy. In fact, one of the Hebrew phrases for Deuteronomy is Mishneh Torah, the retelling or the recounting of the Torah, because that's basically the way some people see it, or that's basically kind of what it is, right? It's a retelling and an expanding upon and a clarification of previous laws in large part. Okay, so this is Deuteronomy 17:18. Okay. And this is what Robert Alter says. The king is to be actively engaged in producing a text of the teaching, translations that embellish the single word right by representing it as caused to be written. Missed the point, forget that. The location of religious authority in a text, a revolutionary idea, is made dramatically clear. A copy of this teaching, which might also be construed as a repetition of this teaching, is in Hebrew Mishneh Torah Hazot, and is a source of one of the Hebrew names as well as the Greek book name for Deuteronomy. Right, I'm sorry, Deuteronomy means the Mishneh Torah, right? Deutero means second or from Sheni, just like the word Mishneh. Okay? The Hebrew Sefer refers to anything written down, from letter to record to what we would call a book. The form in any case would be a scroll. It may well designate, it may well designate here the whole book of Deuteronomy, the valedictory rehearsal of the law delivered by Moses before his death. Some interpreters want to restrict this teaching to just enunciated instructions to the king, but that seems improbable, especially since the text goes on to say, he shall read it in all the days of his life, hardly something he would do with a few lines about keeping tight reins on the royal budget. Okay, well, that's the question. What does it mean, Mishneh Torah Zot? Does it mean this book of Deuteronomy, which means Mishneh Torah, the repetition or the second telling of the Torah? Does it mean the entire 5 books of Moses? That's a discussion for another time. Okay. הספר מלפני הכהנים הלוויים, והייתה עמו וקרא בו כל ימי חייו למען ילמד ליראה את יהוה אלוהיו לשמור את כל דברי התורה הזאת ואת החוקים האלה לעשותם. Okay, so he's supposed to have it with him and read it. Remember, in ancient times, it was not easy to have a book. There were no, well, there were libraries. There were scroll libraries, like in Alexandria. That's a famous one, although that was at a later time. But it wasn't easy. You couldn't just go over to, to Staples and print out a Torah, or go to BibleHub.com, as I am right now. It was a huge, just think of what it takes to. Here's Ariella. But shalom. Yes, the part of horses and Egypt is very strange. It is indeed. What would it have to do with looking to the power of horses? Right. Yep. Okay. But think of how much effort it is to make a Torah scroll, right? When a synagogue wants to make a new Torah scroll, they have to put out, I think the price I used to hear was $50,000, but it's probably gone up a lot by then. Maybe now it's $100,000, and it can take a couple of years to make it, and they have to take in donations, and then they have a big ceremony, Sefer Torah, and all this kind of stuff. So this is what the king is being asked to do, right? There were no libraries as such in ancient Israel, not that we know of. There certainly wasn't a Staples. There certainly wasn't the internet. There certainly wasn't a local branch of the library where you can just go and go to the religion section and check out a copy of the Tanakh for a couple of weeks. There weren't even synagogues where they had these books. It's even questionable whether how many Torah scrolls there were, and whether there were Torah scrolls even in the local cities. It's not clear whether every local city had, and if they did, maybe there was one copy, and then either the Kohen or the Levite would read it out in the gates of the city, right? So this is why the king is told he has to have his own copy of the Torah. It would be like saying, again, I like to use these analogies, it would be like saying to the President of the United States that he has to copy down he has to make a handwritten copy of the Constitution of the United States, if only the current brain dead jerk in the White House would do such a thing. Maybe he'd start following it. But has to write down his own copy of the Constitution and carry it around with him wherever he goes. But this is even more, right? Because but in this analogy, he'd have to handwrite it, right? He couldn't print it out. He couldn't, print it out on his Hewlett Packard printer, or go to Staples and have it printed out. He'd have to handwrite his own copy. Well, that's basically what the king is being asked to do here, and have it with it and read it all the time, because these copies of Torahs were not readily available as they are today. Okay, לבלתי רום לבבו מאחיו ולבלתי סור מן המצווה ימין ושמאל למען יאריך ימים על ממלכתו הוא ובניו בקרב ישראל. Okay, and I think we're going to end here. It's getting late where I am. I wish we had more time to continue. It was a good study. We went for about 2.5 hours. We heard about Bruce's book. We're all waiting for Bruce's book to come out. Ariella, do you have something that you want to add?
Hi. I was just going to ask, I know we haven't gotten to Deuteronomy 20, verse 19, about this, is the tree of the field a man that it should enter the siege before you? It's kind of an interesting way of saying something.
Right. Okay, let's take a look at it for a second. So, all right. So here it is. This is Deuteronomy 20:19. Okay. Ki tatzur el ir yamim rabim. So specifically when you're going to, tatzur, excuse me for 1 second. I will be back in less than 30 seconds. I just have to check on something. One second. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. We had a good eggplant harvest from the garden in the backyard, so I'm roasting eggplants because I'm making eggplant parmesan for Motzei Shabbat dinner. So I just had to go turn the eggplants. Sorry about that. Okay, so Kitatzur el ir yamim rabim. So when you lay siege upon a city for many days, and we know it in ancient times and in modern times, we know what laying siege on a city means. It basically means you you block off a city. That's what the Babylonians did to Jerusalem before they destroyed it. That's what the Romans did to Jerusalem before they destroyed it, right? So that was a common, and it still is a common warfare technique, a blockade, right? So this is talking about a blockade on a city, okay? So for many days, lelachem aleha, okay, in order to wage war against it, litafsa, in order to capture it, to grab it, right, to take it yourself. Lo tashchit et aitza. Don't destroy its trees, okay? Lindoach alav garzen, okay? By lindoach is to nadach is like to I don't know how we translate that, is to wield upon it a garzen is an axe. So don't chop down the trees. Don't destroy the trees by chopping them down with an axe. Kimimenu tochel, because you can eat from them, okay? Oto lo tachrit. Ve'oto lo tichrot, okay, and you shall not chop it down. Ki ha'adam etz hasadeh lavo mipanecha b'matzur. Okay, so what this is saying, okay, so all right, so let me give a translation from here, okay, because ki mimenu tochel, because you can eat from it, okay. So first of all, what trees are we talking about? Okay, the way cities worked is there were walled cities. We're talking about laying siege to a city. You don't lay siege to a city unless it's a walled city. There's no such thing as really laying siege to a what was called one of the prazot, a pirzah or praza. I can't remember what the singular form is, but one of the prazot, which was like a town or a village without a wall. Right? We're talking about a walled city here. Okay. Inside the walled city there weren't a lot of trees. There wasn't a lot of agriculture. If you ever see, some of the excavations of these walled cities from ancient times in Israel and anywhere in the world, really, the walls, the city was not big, right? It was usually just like, one hilltop or something like that. Think of Jerusalem, right? It wasn't even where we have Jerusalem today. Didn't even until later extend up until up to well, I'm not sure exactly where the walls in the first, it might have extended up to, no, I don't even think it extended up to the Temple Mount. But it was basically what we call today the city of David. It was down in the valley below the Temple Mount, right? So walled cities were very small because you can't build these huge walls. You can't build the wall of China around every city, right? And inside them, basically, you had houses, you had marketplaces, you had artisan shops, you had the gates, you had the municipality, all kinds of things having to do with the administration of the city and the administration of justice. But one thing you did not have inside the city was a lot of trees and a lot of agriculture. That was all outside the city, right? In fact, we're told with regard to the Levitical cities, when they're laid out, that they're to have, I think it's 2,000 amma, if I remember correctly. I'd have to look it up again. Right, but it's an explicit law in the Torah that when the Levites are given their cities, they don't have an inheritance in the land, right? They only have their Levitical cities, and that they're also given around those cities. I think in every direction they're given 2,000 amma, which would be about 3,000 feet worth of pasture land, so that they can grow trees and crops and have flocks. Okay, I think it was 2,000 amma, and so all of the agriculture that took place with regard to the city was not inside the city, it was around the city, right? And that makes sense in the context here because we're talking about a siege on the city. If you're sieging the city, you're not inside the city, you're outside the city, right? You're basically preventing, a siege is basically preventing people, animals, anything, food, anything from getting in and out of the city. That's what a siege is. So keep tatsur when you make a siege, right? So the trees that they're talking about are outside the city. So they could easily cut down those trees because they could say, oh, we're at war with these people. Let's cut down their trees, okay, as an act of warfare. But the way I understand this is the Torah saying, first of all, if you're besieging the city, they're not going to be able to get out to get to those trees anyway, right? So why should you cut them down, right? You can eat from them. If you're besieging a city and you're on the outside of the city, you have access to those trees and you can use it as food. So don't cut it down as an act of warfare, maybe as an act of revenge, or maybe you think it needs to be put in cheder, maybe you think it needs to be destroyed because these are idol worshippers and all of their possessions need to be destroyed, just as the animals oftentimes are destroyed, like in the case of what would it be? In the case of was it Og and Sichon, when their cities were attacked, I think the animals were also destroyed. But at any rate, in Deuteronomy 20, it actually even mentions about killing even the animals for the Canaanite cities, right? So that's right up above. We can read that afterwards, right? But the trees, you don't destroy the trees. Okay, you have to destroy, in certain cases, if it's talking about the Canaanites, all of the inhabitants, the men, the women, the children, completely, they have to be wiped out if it's one of the Canaanite cities. And you have to destroy the animals, okay? But don't destroy the trees, okay? Because if you're sieging the city, you can use them as your own food, to feed your army while you're sieging them. And after you take over the city, you can use it as food as well. So that's really the context that we're talking about here, right? Whenever the Torah speaks, we have to understand that the historical / archaeological context, okay? So we read on, okay, and you shall not cut it down, okay? Speaking about it's the tree, right? So if we look at it grammatically, it says lo tashchit et eitz okay? This word eitz, so lo tashchit, do not destroy. Itz, and et is the particle that's used before the direct object. So don't destroy what? Eitz Now, if you see this little dot inside the hay, okay, this means that it means her tree. It's speaking about a single tree. Eitz is in the singular, and then the hay with the nikud in it, okay, is the nikud is put there when it's stating that the singular third person feminine possessive. So it means her tree. Whose tree? It's speaking about Ir. It's referring to the tree of the city. Ir is a feminine noun, as we can see here. Okay. Oh, this is masculine. I always notice. No, it's not masculine. That's not correct. I don't know why it says masculine. Even in modern Hebrew, you don't say Ir Gadol, you say Ir Gedola. So I don't know why that lists as masculine. Hopefully BDB lists it as feminine. Here it is. Noun feminine. Okay. I don't know why the strong says masculine. Maybe in some contexts it's masculine, but Ir is a feminine noun. Okay. So when it says her tree, okay, it means her tree, meaning the city's tree. It's referring back to the city, right? So once again, if I translate it from the beginning, if you lay siege to a city for many days, because sieges, we know if we look historically at sieges, they lasted for many days. They could last sometimes for years, right? Like the Romans, they would lay up the siege works and those siege towers and all this kind of stuff, and they would build sometimes their own walls around the wall of the city to prevent people from going in and out, right? And the sieges could last. Basically, you're basically cutting off the city, and you're basically starving them to death, is what you're doing, right? You're cutting off sometimes the water supply, right? This is exactly, we know about the tunnel of Hezekiah. Hezekiah built a tunnel, right, to be able to lead the water from the Gihon spring up into Jerusalem, because he was afraid of a siege from Sennacherib, that Sennacherib would cut off the water supply. Okay, so what we have here is a situation whereby the Israelites are now sieging a city for many days, right? They're besieging a city, lelachem aleha, as in making war against it. Okay, letafsa, with the intention of taking it over, intention of capturing it. Do not destroy its tree. So literally it says its tree, but there's a phenomenon in Hebrew and in English where a singular verb can represent the general idea of, right? So what would be an example in English? Well, let's say what I'm working on for my master's thesis. I'm talking about sperm whales. As my master's thesis has to do with. I won't get into the whole thing, but it involves sperm whales. Okay, so sometimes I'll say the sperm whale has a foraging behavior where it dives down below as deep as 1,000 meters into the sea to look for squids and octopuses or octopus. Okay, even there. Okay, so I don't say sperm whales. I say the sperm whale. Right. I don't mean a single sperm whale. It's a general way of saying, right? Or the sperm whale searches out squid and octopus, right? It doesn't mean it searches out a single squid or single octopus. It's the general idea of a squid, the general idea of an octopus, the general idea of a sperm whale. The same thing here, where it says tashchit eitzah. Literally, the grammar says eitzah, its tree, the city's tree, right? Her tree, her referring to the city, which is a feminine verb, but it means all the trees in general, right? So just to point that out, okay? Alindoch alav garzen, to wield upon it, again, upon it is speaking about the tree, to wield upon it, the tree, or the trees in general, an axe, kimimenu tochel, because you can eat from it, okay? You can eat from it in the way I explained. You're outside the city. The trees are outside the city. You can eat from it while you're sieging the city. So don't destroy it, just like above, and we're going to read the verses above to put it in context, because above it says destroy all the men, destroy all the women, destroy all the children, destroy all the animals, but don't destroy the trees, okay? That's the context here, okay? And do not cut it down, again, speaking about a tree, but the tree, or speaking about trees in general. Ki ha'adam etz hasadeh lavo mipanecha b'matzor. So this is often mistranslated, right? Usually they just say ki hadam etz hasadeh, which means because a man is a tree of the field. That's probably, I'm guessing, Ariella, that's where your confusion is coming from, because a lot of times you'll hear this phrase that a man is a tree of the field, right? And then when you read it in its context, what does that mean? Like, because a man is a tree of the field to come, right? But that's not what it's saying. It's a question, okay? Ki ha'adam etz hasadeh, because is. Ki ha'adam, because is, in English we would actually read it backwards. Ki etz hasadeh ha'adam, because is a tree of the field a man, lavo mipanecha b'matzor, that it should come before you that it should be put under siege. So the question that's being asked here is, and I'll read it word for word and then I'll translate it into English. Is a man, is it a man, the tree of the field, that it should come before you in the siege, right? So the question is asking, is the tree of the field a man, right? You don't need to destroy it because it's not a man. Is the tree of the field a man? No, it's not. So don't destroy it like you would destroy the men and the women and the children and even the animals, right? It's not a man that you have to destroy it in war. It's just a tree. Leave it alone. It's not bothering you. It can provide you with food. It doesn't have to be destroyed like everything else in the city, even in the Canaanite cities has to be. And that's the question that's being asked there. And that's really the context of the question. And that's really the translation of the question. Okay? So, and then verse 20. And we'll read the above verses just to put in context. Rak etz asher teda, or teda ki lo etz machal, hu oto tashchit. Okay? וקראת ומנית מצור על העיר אשר היא עשה עמך מלחמה עד רעידתה. Okay, so, but a tree which you know, רק עץ אשר תדע כי לא עץ מאכל, but a tree which you are sure, which you know is not an edible tree, it's not having, edible fruits, or it's not edible, right? hu oto tashchit. You can destroy it. Okay? Why? Now it explains, the Torah explains. I'm sorry. Karata ubanita matzor al ha'ir. Okay, why are you going to cut it? Why are you going to destroy it? Why are you going to cut it down? Or why are you going to destroy it? Because you can cut it down. Karata is to cut it down. Ubanita matzor al ha'ir, and you can use it to build your bulwarks, your siege works upon the city. Right? It's going to be done in about. Let's see, we started it. 7:45 soon, at around 9 o'clock. Soon, probably around 10. Okay. Well, let me just finish this off. Okay, I'm almost done. Okay, so ubanita matzor ala ir. Okay, so you can use these. So don't cut down the trees that you can eat from, because it can feed your army while you are besieging the city, and afterwards, when you've taken over the city, you'll have nice fruit trees growing outside your city. But the trees that do not provide that are not edible, that don't have anything edible with them, those you can cut down, and then you can use them to build your siege works on the city. Okay, Asher hu hi asa imach milchama an ridata, which on the city. What now? This is clarifying what type of city. The city that is making war against you. Okay, or that is making war with you. Ad ridata, until it is lirdot, means to subjugate, until it's subjugated. Okay, so that's what's going on there. Okay, this reminds me. So this is actually reminds me of. I used to be a big fan of reading Sun Tzu, The Art of War, and one of the things that Sun Tzu, The Art of War says, and I'm going to just be paraphrasing. It says that do not, when you go to war against another army, the best thing you could do is not bring your own supplies, but you forage off the other army. You destroy the other army, and then you take their supplies, and then you use their supplies against them, because that way you don't have to have lines of transport to bring your supplies all the way from your homeland out to wherever you're fighting the army. And that's exactly what the Torah is saying here, right? So you can use these non-edible trees to build your siege works. Don't bring your siege works. Don't cart your siege works all the way from God knows where. Just destroy the non-edible trees. Okay, don't destroy the trees that you can eat from. Destroy the non-edible trees, and then use those non-edible trees which belong to the city to build your own siege works against the city. Okay, and that's really putting the whole thing in context. Ariella, anything you want to add?
No, that was good. I mean, it showed it right from the Hebrew. That helped a lot. It seemed like some of the translations get it all confused.
Definitely. And then Avior says they chop down the trees to make siege weapons, catapults, battling rams, trebuchets, etc. Exactly, right? Now if we look up above, okay, let's put this in context, okay? So let's look at the verses that come before it, okay? Tikrav el ir le'elachem aleha v'karata aleha l'shalom. So when you approach a city to make war against it, you call out to make peace with it. Okay, I'm paraphrasing because I want to go through a little bit quickly. So when you make war against the city, first you call out and say, come out in peace, surrender. We're giving you the chance to surrender. Okay. Okay. And if they surrender, if they respond to your offer of peace, then they patralach. Okay, so this is very important. And they open for you. What do they open? They're opening the gates of the city, right? Again, we spoke about, I remember it must have been about 10, maybe even 12 or 15 years ago. I did a whole series on the importance of city walls, gates, doors of the gates, and then bolts and keys of the gates. These are themes and analogies that are used hundreds of times throughout the Tanakh, right? So this is a very, very common thing. So patralach here is speaking about if they open for you, if they open the gates of the city, right? So now you don't have to besiege the city. They're opening the gates. They're surrendering, basically. Excuse me for 1 second. Oh, just turn up the oven again, okay? Turn on the timer of the oven all the way up to the 45 minutes, okay? I'll be done in like less than 10 minutes. So they're going to now be you. They're going to become your subjects. You've now subjugated them. Mas implies tribute. Avducha implies servitude. So basically they become a that's fine. They basically become a subjugated tribute city, okay? As was very common in ancient times, it's very common today still, okay? And if they don't choose not to make peace with you, and they choose to make with you war, okay, then you shall besiege it. And again, zata specifically means besiege it, right? It doesn't mean well, it might mean the general tsar means just to give it trouble, really. So let's just see here. So I guess, they're making a distinction of besiege in this case. I guess it really means attack. And then that's in contrast when you're besieging it, when you're making a siege upon it for many days that we see down here. So I'm going to go with that translation as attack, okay? Or you decide to besiege it, to put it under attack, okay? Natata Yahweh Elohecha biyadecha, and God gives it, and if God, or when God gives it into your hands, then you kill all its males by the sword. Okay, so this is a city, and it's going to be contrasted in a second to a city that is within the land of Canaan. So if this is a city that's not in the land of Canaan, you first offered peace. If they open the gates, if they surrender, then they become a tribute city. They become a subjugated city to you, and you kill all of the males. Okay? Rak Anashim, and this is a city that you're going up against idol worshippers, basically, right? You're not just taking some innocent city and just attacking it for money, right? These are cities that for whatever reason, they've either started a war with you, or there's a very good reason why you're attacking them. Okay, I just want to put that in context. Okay, Rak Anashim, you're not just killing innocent people. You're not going to some like random city out in the middle of China that never bothered you and deciding, oh, let's just take over the city and kill all the people. No, that's not the context here, right? It even says above that they're making war with you. In most cases, it's them that start with the Israelites. Okay, or they're idol worshippers that for whatever reason are giving trouble to the Israelites. Okay, Rak anashim u'ataf be'eman v'chol asher yi'eh ba'ir kol shlala taboz lach. So you kill all the males, but the women, the children, the animals, and the kol asher yi'eh ba'ir, and everything else that is in the city, kol shlala, all of its booty, all of its bounty, taboz lach, you shall take as bounty for yourself. V'chalta et shalal oivecha asher natan Yahweh Elohecha lach, and you shall consume the booty of your enemies, which Yahweh your God has given to you. Right. So it's just like we said with Sun Tzu, the Art of War. Right. You don't bring your own stuff. You take over your enemy's stuff, and then you eat it. You use that for yourself. Right. Or you just take it as a prize for yourself. Okay. This is what you should do to all the cities that are far from you, that are very far from you. Okay, that are not among the cities of these nations, and these nations are referring to the Canaanite nations, the land that has to be taken over. Because in the land that has to be taken over, there's no mercy whatsoever. These people have been given 400 plus years to right their ways. They're idol worshippers. They're murderers. They put their own children. They sacrifice their own children in the fire. They commit all kinds of horrible abominations, and their cities are full of blood and idol worship and all kinds of immorality, etc. Okay, Rak me'arei ha'amim ha'ele asher Yahweh Elohecha noten lecha nachala lo tichye kol neshama. But by contrast, from these cities, okay, from the cities of these people, okay, which Yahweh your God gives to you as an inheritance, speaking about the land of Israel, lo techayeh kol neshama, you shall not let live a single breathing thing. Okay, so what does that mean? We see, in contrast to what happens with the cities that are far away, that are outside of the land. Really, that's what it means. Outside of the land of the Canaanites, you kill the males, but you leave the females, the young, the children, the animals, okay? And you take all of the other stuff for yourself, okay? Here, you don't leave the females, the young, the animals, okay? You kill everything. That means the females go, the women go, the children go, everything goes. The animals are killed even, right? And that paints a picture, that gives us, by contrast, that gives us context for the verses we saw below regarding the tree. The one thing you don't kill, right? The one thing you don't destroy is the trees. And that's exactly what verses 19 through 20 are talking about, okay? So let's go on here, okay? Where were we? Lo tichayeh kol nishama. So you don't leave any breathing. Nishama literally means any breathing, anyone breathing. You don't, I'll translate it like that. Translate in modern Hebrew, nishama is a soul, but that's not really what it means. You don't leave anyone breathing. Okay, you kill everyone. Okay, and all the animals as well. Okay, ki echrim tachrimem hachiti ha'emorim ha'kinini ha'kinaani ha'prizi ha'chiyuvi ha'yebusi kashet tzivcha Yahweh Elohecha, because hachrem tachrimem. So this is lachrim, means to completely destroy. Sometimes they translate it as what do they use? I can't remember. They use a certain. There's usually a certain translation, but it means to but it means to destroy. And hachrem tachrimem means you shall certainly destroy. Right? We always say that repetition means emphasis. So when you say hachrem tachrimem, it means you shall utterly destroy. Or you shall certainly destroy. Okay, wipe out completely is basically you shall wipe out completely the Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites. Kasher tzivcha Yahweh Elohecha, as Yahweh your God has commanded you. Okay, why? Lama'an asher lo yilmadu etchem la'asot kechol to'avatam asher asu le'Elohem v'chatatam liYahweh v'chatatem liYahweh Elohechem. In order that they should not teach you to do all of the abominations which they do to their gods, v'chatatem liYahweh Elohecha, and then you end up sinning before Yahweh your God. Okay, but kitatzor el ir yamim rabim. But if you siege a city for many days, then you don't destroy the trees because you can eat from the trees, and because you can use the non-edible trees to make siege works. And as Itan Elior Avios both said so nicely, to make siege weapons, catapults, battering rams, trebuchets, etc. Trebuchets, I guess it is, etc. Okay, and then Eitan also says, my bet is most of the nations would chop down the fruit trees, and Hashem is pointing out not to, and by doing so is another practice for being set apart. Okay, or maybe what God is telling us is, they're stupid in their anger. They chop down the trees, but this is wisdom, right? Don't chop down the trees. You can use them, right? It's almost like Sun Tzu, The Art of War, which is a book full of wisdom. So this is, in a sense, that maybe just giving us effective methods for fighting war. This is of Sun Tzu, The Art of War. Okay. Any final comments? Any final questions? If not, I'm going to end the study. Anybody? Oh, Ariella disappeared. I guess sometimes she has problems with the internet. So, okay, everyone, I'm going to end the study. It was a really, really interesting study. Thank you, Bruce, if you're still there, for telling us all about your book. And I wish everyone a Shabbat Shalom and a Shavua Tov. And Be'ezarat Yahweh, we'll see you all next week. Bye-bye. Shavua Tov, Shabbat Shalom.